You know that feeling when you're lying in bed scrolling through endless videos trying to find something that'll help you drift off to sleep? Most people go for rain sounds or meditation videos, but there's this weird corner of the internet that's discovered something completely unexpected: Family Guy lore videos. And honestly, it makes perfect sense once you think about it. Picture this: Peter Griffin's bumbling voice rambling about some ridiculous backstory while you slowly fade into dreamland. It's like having that one friend who tells really long, meandering stories that somehow become the perfect background noise for sleep. But here's the thing: Family Guy isn't just random jokes and cutaway gags. There's actually this incredibly deep, twisted universe hiding beneath all the chaos, and when you start exploring it at bedtime, something magical happens. Tonight, we're diving into the strangest, most soothing rabbit hole on YouTube. We're talking about Family Guy lore that's specifically designed to help you sleep. And trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll understand why millions of people are choosing Stewie's time travel adventures over counting sheep. Let's start with why this works so well. Your brain needs something engaging enough to distract from racing thoughts, but not so stimulating that it keeps you awake. Family Guy lore hits this sweet spot perfectly. The familiar voices create a sense of comfort, like having old friends nearby. The storylines are complex enough to occupy your mind, but delivered in that laid-back, conversational tone that naturally slows your heart rate. The beauty of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its structure. Unlike other shows that build tension toward climactic moments, Family Guy operates on this weird, episodic flow where nothing is too serious or urgent. Even when Peter is destroying the town or Stewie is plotting world domination, there's this underlying absurdity that signals to your brain that everything is okay. It's chaos, but comfortable chaos. One of the most popular sleep topics is Stewie's time travel timeline. Now, if you've watched the show casually, you might think Stewie's time adventures are just random episodes. But when you dig deeper, there's this incredibly complex web of cause and effect that spans decades. Stewie has literally shaped the Griffin family history in ways most viewers never realize. Think about it. In one timeline, Stewie prevents his own birth, which creates this paradox where he exists but shouldn't. In another, he saves his father's life, completely altering the family dynamic. These aren't just throwaway episodes. They're building blocks of an intricate multiverse where every action ripples through time. And when someone narrates this in a gentle, sleepy voice while you're tucked in bed, it becomes this dreamy exploration of cause and effect that naturally leads your mind into sleep. The time travel lore gets even more interesting when you consider Stewie's relationship with Brian. Their adventures through different eras reveal hidden layers of both characters. Brian isn't just the family dog who talks. He's this tortured intellectual who's lived through multiple timelines, sometimes remembering previous versions of events, sometimes completely oblivious. The complexity of their friendship across different realities becomes this beautiful, melancholy meditation on friendship and loyalty. What makes this perfect for sleep is how these time travel stories often end with everything returning to normal, or at least a version of normal. There's no real stakes because the show's format demands that the status quo be maintained. Your subconscious picks up on this pattern and relaxes, knowing that no matter how wild the adventure gets, the Griffin family will be okay by morning. Another incredibly soothing topic is the hidden depth of Peter Griffin's character. On the surface, he's just this obnoxious, immature father figure. But when you start examining his backstory, there's surprising emotional complexity. Peter's relationship with his own father, Francis, reveals layers of abandonment issues and the desperate need for approval that drives much of his behavior. The Catholic guilt that shapes Peter's worldview, his struggles with identity, his genuine love for his family despite constantly endangering them, all of this creates this rich psychological portrait. When narrated as bedtime content, Peter's flaws become almost endearing. He's not a bad person, he's just deeply human in the most ridiculous possible way. The show has quietly built this mythology around Peter's various jobs and failures. From working at the brewery to his brief stint as a country music star, each career represents a different aspect of the American dream gone wrong. But instead of being depressing, it's oddly comforting. Peter always bounces back, always finds something new to be enthusiastic about. His resilience becomes this gentle reminder that failure isn't permanent, that there's always another chance to mess things up in new and interesting ways. Lois Griffin's background provides another rich vein of sleep-friendly lore. Her wealthy upbringing, her musical talents, her complicated relationship with her parents, all of this creates this fascinating contrast with her current life. She chose chaos over comfort, love over luxury. When explored in that drowsy, contemplative tone that characterizes good sleep content, Lois becomes this complex figure who represents the compromises we all make for love. The show has revealed that Lois has this incredibly patient, almost saint-like quality that allows her to tolerate Peter's behavior. But occasionally, we see cracks in this facade, moments where her true feelings break through. These glimpses of Lois's inner life become fascinating character studies when presented as gentle bedtime analysis. Meg Griffin represents something even more interesting in the show's mythology. She's the perpetual outsider, the family member who never quite fits in. But when you examine her character closely, she's often the most sensible person in the room. Her isolation isn't really about her being unlikable. It's about her being different, more grounded than the rest of her chaotic family. The psychological dynamics of how the Griffin family treats Meg reveal uncomfortable truths about family structures and social hierarchies. But when explored as sleep content, these observations become philosophical musings rather than harsh critiques. Meg's resilience in the face of constant rejection becomes almost inspiring, a quiet testament to the strength of people who don't fit conventional molds. Chris Griffin's journey through adolescence provides another layer of gentle complexity. His artistic talents, his kind heart, his struggles with self-image, all of this unfolds against the backdrop of typical teenage challenges, amplified by his family's dysfunction. Chris represents hope in the Griffin universe, the possibility that the next generation might break free from destructive patterns. The show has developed this subtle running theme about Chris's potential. He's genuinely talented, genuinely caring, but constantly undermined by his environment. When narrated as bedtime content, Chris's story becomes this quiet meditation on nurture versus nature, on how children can maintain their essential goodness despite chaotic circumstances. Brian Griffin deserves special attention because he's arguably the most complex character in the entire series. He's an intellectual trapped in a dog's body, an artist struggling with mediocrity, a liberal idealist living in a conservative household. His pretensions and failures make him simultaneously the most relatable and most frustrating character. Brian's writing career, his romantic relationships, his drinking problem, his philosophical debates with Stewie, all of this creates this rich tapestry of middle-aged disappointment wrapped in surreal comedy. When presented as sleep content, Brian's struggles become universal human experiences filtered through the lens of absurdity. The relationship between Brian and Stewie forms the emotional core of many episodes, and their dynamic has evolved significantly over the show's long run. Early episodes portrayed them as adversaries, but they've developed into this unusual friendship between two intellectuals who understand each other's isolation within the Griffin household. Their conversations, whether they're traveling through time or just sitting in the living room, often touch on profound themes of mortality, purpose, and connection. When these moments are compiled and narrated as bedtime content, they become these surprisingly deep philosophical discussions that naturally lead the mind toward contemplative rest. The supporting characters in Family Guy have developed their own rich backstories that provide endless material for sleep-friendly content. Glenn Quagmire, despite his obvious character flaws, has this complex history as a pilot and adventurer. His relationship with his father, his military service, his various romantic entanglements, all of this creates this surprisingly detailed character study. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created interesting continuity questions that lore enthusiasts love to explore. The dynamics of the friend group, how relationships change over time, how people grow apart and come back together, these themes resonate on a deeper level when explored in that gentle, bedtime storytelling style. Joe Swanson's backstory as a police officer and his adjustment to life in a wheelchair provides material for surprisingly touching character exploration. His determination, his relationship with his family, his role as the moral center of Peter's friend group, All of this unfolds into rich character development that works beautifully as sleep content. The world building in Family Guy extends beyond the main characters to include the town of Quahog itself, the recurring locations, the background characters who appear across multiple episodes, the local politics and social dynamics. All of this creates a lived-in universe that feels surprisingly real despite its cartoon absurdity. The show has developed this consistent internal logic about how Quahog operates, from the local government to the business community to the social hierarchies. When explored as lore content, these details create this comforting sense of a complete world where everything has its place, even if that place is completely ridiculous. Family Guy's relationship with pop culture provides another fascinating avenue for sleep-friendly exploration. The show's countless references and parodies create this massive web of connections to movies, TV shows, music, and historical events. Tracing these references becomes like a gentle intellectual exercise that occupies the mind without overstimulating it. The cultural commentary embedded in these references often reveals surprising insight about American society, entertainment, and human nature. When presented as bedtime analysis, these observations become thoughtful cultural criticism delivered in the most relaxed possible format. The show's approach to continuity creates interesting puzzles for lore enthusiasts. Some episodes clearly exist in the same universe, building on previous events and character development. Others seem to exist in isolation, resetting everything back to a baseline. Understanding which episodes connect and which stand alone becomes this gentle mental exercise, perfect for bedtime. This flexible approach to continuity actually enhances the show's value as sleep content. Unlike serialized dramas where missing details might leave you confused, Family Guy's episodic nature means you can drift in and out of consciousness without losing the thread of what's happening. The animation style and visual storytelling in Family Guy contribute to its effectiveness as sleep content. The character designs are simple and comforting. The color palette is warm and familiar, and the pacing of visual jokes follows predictable patterns. Your brain learns to anticipate the rhythm of the show, which naturally promotes relaxation. The voice acting deserves special mention because the performers have developed these characters over decades. The familiarity of these voices creates an immediate sense of comfort and security. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, Alex Borstein as Lois, Mila Kunis as Meg, each voice becomes like a comfortable presence in your bedroom. The musical elements in Family Guy add another layer of sleep-friendly content. The show frequently features elaborate musical numbers that range from Broadway-style productions to simple character songs. These musical interludes often reveal character depths and emotions that regular dialogue might not capture. When compiled as sleep content, these musical moments become like gentle lullabies that showcase different aspects of the characters' personalities. Conway Twitty performances, Stewie's show tunes, Peter's various musical adventures, all of this creates a diverse soundtrack for drifting off to sleep. The show's exploration of family dynamics provides universal themes that resonate regardless of the absurd context. The Griffin family, despite their dysfunction, genuinely cares about each other. Their conflicts and reconciliations follow familiar patterns that most viewers can relate to from their own family experiences. When examined as bedtime content, these family relationships become comforting reminders of the complexity and resilience of human connections. Even when Peter does something incredibly selfish or Stewie plots against his mother, the underlying love and loyalty always reassert themselves. The meta-humor in Family Guy creates another interesting layer for lore exploration. The show frequently acknowledges its own existence as a television program, breaking the fourth wall and commenting on its own production. These moments create this playful relationship between the show and its audience that enhances its value as comfort viewing. Understanding the real-world context behind certain episodes and jokes adds depth to the viewing experience without requiring intense concentration. The show's commentary on television, animation, and entertainment industry becomes gentle insider knowledge that enhances appreciation without demanding active analysis. The evolution of Family Guy over its many seasons provides rich material for comparative analysis. Early episodes had different character dynamics, different humor styles, and different production values. Tracing how the show has changed and developed becomes like following the growth of old friends. This long-term perspective on the series creates a sense of history and continuity that enhances its comfort value. You're not just watching random episodes. You're participating in this ongoing story that has unfolded over decades of real time. The fan community around Family Guy has developed its own theories and interpretations that add layers of meaning to seemingly simple episodes. These fan theories become part of the show's extended lore, creating additional content for exploration and discussion. When presented as bedtime content, these fan interpretations and theories become like bedtime stories shared among friends. They're speculative and playful rather than definitive, which makes them perfect for that drowsy state between wakefulness and sleep. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into social commentary and cultural criticism. The show has influenced animation, humor, and television production in measurable ways. Understanding this broader impact adds depth to individual episodes without requiring intense focus. This cultural context becomes another gentle layer of analysis that enhances the viewing experience. You're not just watching cartoons, you're experiencing a significant piece of contemporary American culture that has shaped entertainment and comedy. The merchandising and spin-off content around Family Guy creates additional universe expansion that lore enthusiasts love to explore. Video games, books, merchandise, and related media all contribute to the overall Griffin family mythology. These extensions of the core show become like supplementary reading that enhances understanding without being essential. They're bonus content that rewards dedicated fans while remaining accessible to casual viewers. So there you have it, the surprisingly deep and genuinely soothing world of Family Guy lore designed specifically for sleep. What started as a simple animated comedy has evolved into this rich, complex universe filled with character development, cultural commentary, and surprisingly profound themes about family, friendship, and human nature. The next time you're lying awake at 3 a.m, scrolling through endless content options, remember that sometimes the most unexpected choices make the best bedtime companions. Peter Griffin's chaotic adventures and Stewie's time travel paradoxes might just be exactly what your brain needs to finally relax and drift off into peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the multiverse of Family Guy, everything always works out in the end, which is exactly the kind of reassurance we all need before closing our eyes for the night. What if I told you that the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island, holds some of the most intricate storytelling mysteries hidden in plain sight? Tonight, we're diving deep into the sprawling universe of Family Guy, uncovering the hidden lore, forgotten storylines, and interconnected mysteries that make this animated sitcom far more complex than most people realize. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the surprisingly rich mythology of the Griffin family and their bizarre little town. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Family Guy isn't just a collection of random cutaway gags and crude humor. Beneath all the chaos lies a carefully constructed universe with its own internal logic, recurring themes, and surprisingly deep character development that spans over 2 decades of storytelling. The show has created an entire ecosystem of characters, locations, and running narratives that interweave in ways that become apparent only when you step back and look at the bigger picture. Consider the Griffin family home itself. That modest 2-story house at 31 Spooner Street has witnessed countless adventures, but it's also a character in its own right. The house has its own history, its own secrets, and its own role in the family's story. We've seen glimpses of its past through various episodes, learning about previous owners and the strange events that have occurred within its walls. The basement has served as everything from a secret laboratory to a tornado shelter, while the attic holds forgotten memories and mysterious artifacts from the family's past. Peter Griffin, the family patriarch, represents something far more complex than the typical bumbling father figure. His character arc across hundreds of episodes reveals a man struggling with responsibility, identity, and his place in the world. His various jobs throughout the series aren't just random plot devices, they're explorations of the American, working-class experience. From his time at the toy factory to his stint as a fisherman, from his brief career as a bodyguard to his adventures in television production. Peter's employment history tells a story about economic uncertainty and the changing nature of work in modern America. The relationship between Peter and his father-in-law, Carter Pewterschmidt, opens up entire storylines about class, wealth, and family dynamics. Carter represents old money, established power, and traditional values, while Peter embodies working-class sensibilities and anti-establishment attitudes. Their ongoing conflict reflects broader cultural tensions about privilege, success, and what it means to be a man in contemporary society. The episodes focusing on their relationship often reveal deeper truths about both characters, showing us sides of Peter we rarely see, and humanizing Carter beyond his role as the wealthy antagonist. Lois Griffin's character development represents one of the show's most subtle long-term storytelling achievements. Initially presented as the patient, long-suffering wife, Lois has evolved into a complex character with her own ambitions, frustrations, and moral complexities. Her musical background, her brief career as a model, her struggles with motherhood, and her occasional dark turns all contribute to a character portrait that's far richer than it appears on the surface. The episodes that focus on Lois often explore themes of unfulfilled potential, the sacrifices women make for family, and the tension between personal desires and social expectations. The children of the Griffin family each represent different aspects of growing up in modern America. Meg's role as the family scapegoat initially seems cruel, but viewed through a longer lens, her character arc becomes a meditation on adolescence, social acceptance, and finding one's place in the world. Her various attempts to fit in, her brief moments of triumph, and her resilience in the face of constant rejection tell a story about teenage life that's both exaggerated and surprisingly authentic. The episodes where Meg finally stands up for herself or finds temporary happiness hit differently when you understand the full context of her journey. Chris Griffin's character explores themes of masculinity, creativity, and coming of age. His artistic talents, his awkward social interactions, and his relationship with his father create a narrative about growing up different in a world that values conformity. The episodes that focus on Chris often deal with sensitive topics like bullying, self-expression, and the pressure to live up to expectations. His friendship with Herbert, the elderly neighbor, creates uncomfortable comedy, but also touches on themes of loneliness and the generation gap. Then there's Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire series. His evolution from would-be world conqueror to sophisticated intellectual represents one of the most significant character developments in animated television. Stewie's relationship with Brian, his adventures through time and space, and his gradual coming to terms with his own identity create storylines that are simultaneously hilarious and surprisingly moving. The episodes that focus on Stewie often push the boundaries of what's possible in the Family Guy universe, introducing science fiction elements, philosophical discussions, and emotional depth that contrasts sharply with the show's typical tone. Brian Griffin serves as the show's moral center and intellectual conscience, but he's also deeply flawed in ways that make him more human than many actual human characters. His struggles with alcoholism, his pretentious intellectual posturing, his complicated romantic relationships, and his role as the family's voice of reason create a character who's simultaneously admirable and infuriating. The episodes that explore Brian's background, his relationship with his own identity as a talking dog, and his place in human society often serve as vehicles for social commentary and philosophical exploration. The town of Quahog itself is a character worthy of deep exploration. This fictional Rhode Island community has its own ecosystem of recurring characters, local institutions, and cultural traditions. The Drunken Clam serves as more than just Peter's favorite bar. It's a gathering place where working-class philosophy gets hashed out over beer and conversation. Jerome, the bartender, represents stability and wisdom in a world of chaos. The regular patrons each have their own stories and perspectives that contribute to the show's exploration of community and belonging. Quahog's local government, represented by Mayor Adam West, creates storylines that satirize American politics while also celebrating the absurdity of civic life. Mayor West's bizarre policies, his strange obsessions, and his genuine care for his constituents create a character who's simultaneously incompetent and oddly effective. The episodes dealing with local politics often reveal truths about democracy, leadership, and the relationship between citizens and their government. The show's approach to religion and spirituality, primarily explored through the Griffin family's relationship with their local church and various religious figures, creates ongoing narratives about faith, morality, and community. These storylines often challenge both religious orthodoxy and secular assumptions, creating space for nuanced discussions about belief and practice in modern American life. Family Guy's use of cutaway gags isn't just random humor, it's a storytelling technique that allows the show to explore ideas and scenarios that wouldn't fit into the main narrative. These brief vignettes often comment on historical events, pop culture phenomena, and social issues in ways that are both entertaining and insightful. The cumulative effect of hundreds of these cutaways creates a comprehensive commentary on American culture and society. The show's relationship with popular culture goes beyond simple parody. The various celebrity appearances, pop culture references, and media satires create a running commentary on fame, entertainment, and the role of media in modern life. Episodes that focus on Peter's brief brush with celebrity or Brian's attempts at literary fame explore themes about success, authenticity, and the price of public recognition. The recurring characters in Family Guy's universe each contribute to the show's exploration of different aspects of American life. Glenn Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual liberation, but episodes that delve deeper into his character reveal a more complex individual struggling with his own demons and desires. Cleveland Brown's friendship with Peter and his eventual move to his own spin-off series created storylines about race, friendship, and community that the show handled with surprising sensitivity. The show's treatment of disability, primarily through the character of Joe Swanson, creates ongoing narratives about resilience, adaptation, and the challenges faced by people with disabilities in American society. Joe's character development over the series shows him as a fully realized individual whose disability is just one aspect of his identity, not its defining characteristic. Family Guy's exploration of family dynamics extends beyond the immediate Griffin household to include the extended family members who appear throughout the series. Peter's relationship with his father Mickey, Lois's complex feelings about her parents, and the various relatives who drift in and out of episodes create a broader picture of how families function, dysfunction, and evolve over time. The show's handling of death and mortality, from the controversial killing and resurrection of Brian to the various deaths of minor characters throughout the series, creates ongoing meditations on loss, grief, and the meaning of life. These episodes often reveal the deep emotional connections between characters that might not be apparent in more comedic episodes. The science fiction elements that creep into Family Guy through Stewie's inventions and time travel adventures create opportunities for the show to explore philosophical questions about destiny, free will, and the nature of reality. The episodes dealing with alternate timelines and parallel universes suggest that the Family Guy universe is far more complex and interconnected than it initially appears. The show's treatment of education, primarily through the various school episodes and Chris and Meg's academic experiences, creates commentary on the American educational system, social hierarchies among young people, and the challenges of growing up in contemporary society. These storylines often reveal the ways that institutional structures both support and fail young people. Family Guy's exploration of work and economic life through Peter's various jobs and the family's financial struggles creates ongoing commentary about class, opportunity, and the American dream. The episodes that focus on economic hardship often reveal the ways that financial stress affects family relationships and individual well-being. The show's approach to mental health, explored through various characters' psychological struggles and Brian's role as unofficial family therapist, creates space for discussions about depression, anxiety, and the importance of mental health care. These storylines often handle serious topics with both humor and genuine sensitivity. As we wrap up this journey through the hidden depths of Family Guy's universe, it's worth noting that this exploration only scratches the surface of the rich storytelling possibilities contained within this seemingly simple animated comedy. The show's ability to balance crude humor with genuine emotional depth, social commentary with pure entertainment, and chaos with carefully constructed narrative arcs makes it a unique achievement in television comedy. The next time you watch an episode of Family Guy, try looking beyond the surface humor to see the deeper stories being told. Notice how character relationships evolve over time, how running gags develop new meanings in different contexts, and how the show uses its absurdist elements to explore very real human experiences and social issues. Sweet dreams, and remember that sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in the most unexpected places, even in the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island. What if I told you that underneath all the random cutaway gags and crude humor, Family Guy has been building one of the most intricate and bizarre mythologies in television history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the hidden lore that connects everything from Stewie's time travel adventures to the cosmic horror lurking beneath Quahog's seemingly normal surface. Get comfortable, because this journey through the Griffin family's secret universe is going to be a wild ride that might just change how you see every episode forever. Let's start with something that seems innocent enough, but opens up an entire rabbit hole of implications. Have you ever noticed that Stewie Griffin isn't just a baby with advanced intelligence? He's actually a being that exists outside the normal flow of time itself. Throughout the series, we've seen him build time machines, travel to alternate dimensions, and even meet future versions of himself. But here's where it gets interesting. In several episodes, Stewie demonstrates knowledge of events that haven't happened yet, and sometimes he seems to be aware that he's in a television show. This isn't just random comedy writing. There's a consistent pattern that suggests Stewie might be some kind of temporal entity that chose to inhabit the body of a baby for reasons we're only beginning to understand. Think about it. He's built multiple time machines from scratch using household items. He's created clones, developed advanced weaponry, and even constructed interdimensional portals. No normal baby, no matter how intelligent, could accomplish these things without some kind of supernatural assistance or inherent cosmic power. The evidence becomes even more compelling when you consider his relationship with Brian. Unlike other family members who seem to understand Stewie only sporadically, Brian consistently communicates with him on an adult level. But Brian isn't just any dog. He's a talking dog who drives cars, writes novels, and has existential crises about the nature of reality. The fact that these two characters can communicate perfectly suggests they might both be operating on a different plane of existence than the rest of the family. Speaking of Brian, let's explore his own mysterious origins. He was found as a stray by the Griffin family, but his background remains largely unexplained. He drinks alcohol, smokes cigarettes, and engages in romantic relationships with humans. In several episodes, we've seen him question his own nature and struggle with the absurdity of being a talking dog in a world where most animals don't speak. This existential awareness might be the key to understanding his true nature. There's a theory that Brian represents a bridge between the normal world and the supernatural elements that permeate Quahog. He's intelligent enough to recognize the strangeness around him, but trapped in a form that prevents him from fully participating in human society. His conversations with Stewie often touch on philosophical and scientific concepts that suggest both characters are aware of deeper truths about their reality. Now let's talk about Peter Griffin himself, because beneath his bumbling exterior lies something far more complex. Peter has survived explosions, falls from incredible heights, and injuries that should have killed him dozens of times over. He's also demonstrated superhuman strength in various episodes, lifting cars and fighting characters with obvious supernatural abilities. But more importantly, Peter seems to be a nexus point for the weird events that happen in Quahog. Everywhere Peter goes, reality seems to bend slightly. Characters break into musical numbers for no reason. People appear and disappear without explanation. The laws of physics become suggestions rather than rules. It's as if Peter's presence weakens the barriers between the normal world and something much stranger. This could explain why the Griffin family attracts so many bizarre situations and supernatural encounters. Consider the episode where Peter gains psychic powers, or the times he's been visited by supernatural entities. These aren't isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern that suggests Peter might be unknowingly channeling some kind of cosmic energy. His simple-minded nature could be a protective mechanism that prevents him from fully comprehending his own power, because if Peter ever became truly aware of his abilities, the consequences could be catastrophic. Lois Griffin presents her own mysteries. On the surface, She's the long-suffering wife trying to keep her chaotic family together, but Lois has her own dark secrets and hidden depths. She comes from a wealthy family with connections that extend far beyond what we see on screen. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, isn't just rich. He's connected to military-industrial complexes and shadowy organizations that operate behind the scenes. Throughout the series, Lois has demonstrated skills and knowledge that suggest extensive training in areas most housewives would never encounter. She's fluent in multiple languages, skilled in combat, and has connections to criminal organizations. In several episodes, she's shown leading double lives that involve activities ranging from boxing to working with international intelligence agencies. These aren't random plot devices, but hints at a much larger story about who Lois really is and why she ended up with the Griffin family. There's also the question of how Lois manages to hold the family together despite the constant chaos. She seems to have an almost supernatural ability to adapt to whatever insane situation her family creates. Whether it's dealing with Stewie's death rays or Peter's latest scheme to destroy the neighborhood, Lois always finds a way to restore some semblance of normalcy. This suggests she might be operating with knowledge or abilities that go beyond what we see on the surface. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this strange mythology. It's supposedly a normal Rhode Island community, but the events that occur there on a regular basis defy all logic. The town has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Its residents include everything from former Nazis to aliens to interdimensional beings. The mayor is a corrupt official who openly admits to criminal activities, yet somehow the town continues to function. What's really interesting is how quickly the residents of Quahog accept supernatural events. When a chicken fights Peter through half the town, destroying buildings and causing massive property damage, everyone just goes back to their normal lives afterward. When time travel events create paradoxes that should fundamentally alter reality, the town adapts without question. This suggests that Quahog exists in a state of flexible reality where the impossible becomes routine. The recurring locations in Quahog also hint at deeper mysteries. The Drunken Clam isn't just a bar. It's a place where characters regularly receive prophetic dreams and encounter supernatural entities. Quahog Elementary School has been the site of numerous reality-bending events. Even the Griffin house itself seems to exist partially outside normal space and time, with rooms that appear and disappear and basement areas that extend far beyond what the exterior structures should allow. Let's dive deeper into the show's treatment of death and resurrection, because Family Guy has a very loose relationship with mortality that suggests something profound about the nature of its reality. Characters die regularly, sometimes multiple times in the same episode, only to return without explanation. Brian has died and been brought back to life. Kenny McCormick from South Park has appeared in Family Guy, bringing his own resurrection mythology with him. This casual treatment of death isn't just a comedy device. It suggests that the characters exist in a reality where death is temporary or where multiple versions of the same character can exist simultaneously. Stewie has encountered alternate versions of himself and his family members from different timelines and dimensions. These aren't dreams or imagination sequences, but actual encounters with other versions of reality. The implications of this go far beyond simple comedy. If characters can die and return, if alternate versions of themselves exist in parallel dimensions, then the entire show might be taking place across multiple realities simultaneously. Each episode could be showing us events from different timelines or dimensions where slightly different versions of the characters exist. This would explain the show's inconsistent continuity and the way characters sometimes seem to forget major events from previous episodes. They're not forgetting. They're simply different versions of themselves who never experienced those events. The show isn't ignoring its own history. It's showing us glimpses of an infinite multiverse where every possible variation of the Griffin family's story plays out simultaneously. The religious and mythological elements in Family Guy also contribute to this deeper lore. The show has featured appearances by God, Jesus, the devil, and various other religious figures. These aren't parody versions, but actual supernatural entities who interact with the characters and influence events in Quahog. This suggests that the show's reality operates under a cosmology where divine and infernal forces are real and active. More intriguingly, these supernatural entities often seem to have specific interest in the Griffin family. God has personally intervened in their lives multiple times. Death himself has appeared as a character and formed relationships with family members. This level of cosmic attention suggests that the Griffins aren't just random people, but individuals who play important roles in some larger supernatural conflict or cosmic plan. The show's frequent use of cutaway gags might also be more than just random humor. These sequences often show Peter or other characters in completely different time periods, locations, or situations. What if these aren't imaginary scenarios, but glimpses of other realities where versions of these characters actually exist? The cutaway structure could be the show's way of revealing the multiverse that underlies its narrative. This interpretation would mean that every absurd cutaway gag is actually a window into an alternate dimension. Peter as a knight in medieval times isn't just a joke, it's a glimpse of a reality where a version of Peter actually lived during that era. The seemingly random nature of these sequences could be showing us how the barriers between dimensions occasionally thin, allowing characters to perceive events from parallel worlds. Cleveland Brown's spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy takes on new significance in this context. His move to Virginia and subsequent return isn't just a narrative convenience, it's evidence of how characters can move between different versions of reality. The Cleveland show might have been showing us events from a dimension where Cleveland never moved back to Quahog, while his return to Family Guy represents a convergence of timelines. The relationship between Family Guy and other animated shows in the same universe adds another layer to this mythology. The Simpsons crossover episode wasn't just a marketing stunt. It was a demonstration that these shows exist in connected realities. Characters can travel between Springfield and Quahog, because these locations exist in the same multiverse, just in different dimensional frequencies. As we dive deeper into the show's lore, we start to see patterns that suggest a hidden intelligence behind the chaos. The seemingly random events that plague the Griffin family might actually be tests or challenges designed by cosmic forces to determine their worthiness for some greater purpose. Stewie's advanced intelligence, Brian's existential awareness, Peter's reality-warping presence, and Lois's mysterious background could all be pieces of a larger puzzle. The show's self-aware humor and frequent breaking of the fourth wall might be characters occasionally becoming conscious of their true nature as beings in a constructed reality. When characters acknowledge that they're in a television show, they might be experiencing moments of cosmic awareness where they perceive the true nature of their existence. This brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of Family Guy's hidden lore. The show might be depicting the gradual awakening of its characters to their true nature as multidimensional beings trapped in a television narrative. Each season, the characters become slightly more aware of the absurdity of their situations and the arbitrary nature of the rules governing their reality. Stewie's evolution from would-be world conqueror to time-traveling adventurer represents his growing understanding of his cosmic nature. Brian's increasing cynicism and existential crises reflect his awareness that he's trapped between worlds. Peter's adventures become more outlandish because he's unconsciously pushing against the boundaries of his reality. Lois's hidden depths suggest she's always been aware of the truth, but has been protecting her family from it. The true horror and beauty of Family Guy's lore lies in this gradual revelation that nothing is as it seems. What appears to be random comedy is actually a complex meditation on the nature of reality, identity, and consciousness. The Griffin family's bizarre adventures are their unconscious attempts to break free from the limitations of their constructed world and discover their true nature as cosmic entities playing out an eternal story across infinite dimensions. So the next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details that seem like throwaway gags. Notice how death has no permanent meaning, how reality bends around the characters, how they sometimes seem aware of forces beyond their comprehension. You're not just watching a comedy show. You're witnessing the gradual awakening of beings who are slowly discovering that they exist in a reality far stranger and more wonderful than they ever imagined. This is the true lore of Family Guy, Hidden beneath layers of crude humor and random cutaways, a story about consciousness trying to understand itself across multiple realities and infinite possibilities. Sweet dreams. Picture this. You're scrolling through endless videos trying to find something to help you drift off to sleep, and somehow, you stumble across Family Guy lore. Sounds weird, right? But here's the thing that might surprise you. The chaotic world of the Griffin family actually contains some of the most bizarrely comforting storytelling patterns that work perfectly as background noise for sleep. Tonight, we're diving deep into the unexpected rabbit hole of Family Guy's hidden mythology, character backstories, and running gags that have been quietly building for over 2 decades. Trust me, by the end of this exploration, you'll understand why this animated chaos makes for surprisingly perfect sleep content. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Family Guy isn't just random jokes thrown together. There's actually a complex web of continuity that runs through the entire series, creating this weird sense of familiarity that your brain craves when winding down. Think about it. Every episode follows certain predictable patterns. Peter does something stupid. Lois gets frustrated. Stewie plots world domination. Brian gets philosophical. Chris says something innocent yet profound, and Meg gets ignored. These patterns become almost meditative when you're not actively watching but just listening. The Griffin house itself has become this iconic location that feels more real than most TV homes. You know exactly where everything is. The living room with that brown couch facing the TV. The kitchen where most family arguments happen. Peter and Lois's bedroom where countless cutaway gags have originated. Stewie's room with all his advanced technology that somehow nobody questions. This geographical consistency creates a mental map that feels safe and familiar, exactly what your brain wants when transitioning to sleep. Now, let's talk about Peter Griffin's backstory, because it's way more elaborate than you might remember. Peter wasn't always the bumbling patriarch we know today. His childhood in Rhode Island shaped him in ways that the show has been slowly revealing for years. His relationship with his father, Mickey McFinnigan, later revealed to be Francis Griffin, created deep-seated issues around authority and approval that explain so much of his adult behavior. The revelation that Francis wasn't even his biological father added layers to Peter's identity crisis that runs throughout the series. Peter's various jobs throughout the show create this strange career timeline that somehow makes sense in the Family Guy universe. From his early days at the toy factory to his time at the brewery, each workplace became a setting for elaborate storylines and character development. His relationships with his co-workers like Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland formed the foundation of the show's secondary character network. These aren't just random neighbors. They're part of an intricate social ecosystem that's been developing since episode 1. Speaking of Joe Swanson, his backstory represents some of the show's most surprisingly deep storytelling. The details of how he became paralyzed have been explored multiple times, each revealing adding new layers to his character. His police career, his relationship with his wife Bonnie, and his struggles with his disability are handled with unexpected sensitivity for a show known for its controversial humor. Joe's friendship with Peter represents this weird masculine bond that transcends typical sitcom relationships. Glenn Quagmire might seem like a one-note character, but his history is incredibly complex. His career as a pilot isn't just a job setup for jokes. It's connected to his adventurous personality, his worldliness, and his complex relationship with commitment. The episodes exploring his relationship with his father, his various romantic entanglements, and his twisted psychology reveal a character struggling with deeper issues beneath the surface humor. His rivalry with Brian creates ongoing tension that drives multiple episode plots. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created this weird narrative gap that the writers have handled in interesting ways. His move to Stoolbend and eventual return to Quahog wasn't just a business decision. It was woven into the show's mythology in ways that acknowledge the real-world circumstances while maintaining fictional continuity. His relationship with his new wife Donna and his blended family created storylines that explored themes of second chances and family dynamics. Brian Griffin represents perhaps the show's most complex character development. He's not just a talking dog, he's a struggling writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and Peter's best friend, all wrapped into one character. His various romantic relationships, from his puppy love crushes to his serious adult relationships, have been explored with surprising depth. His death and resurrection created one of the show's most emotionally impactful storylines, proving that viewers had formed genuine emotional attachments to these characters. Brian's literary aspirations connect to larger themes about artistic struggle and unfulfilled potential that run throughout the series. His unfinished novel, his various writing projects, and his intellectual pretensions create this ongoing character arc about creativity and disappointment. His relationship with Stewie represents one of television's most unique friendships, transcending the typical pet-owner dynamic to become something genuinely touching. Stewie Griffin's evolution from world-conquering villain to sexually confused genius baby represents one of the most significant character developments in animation history. His early episodes focused on elaborate schemes to kill Lois and take over the world. Gradually, the show revealed deeper layers to his personality, exploring his relationships, his sexuality, and his genuine affection for his family, despite his sinister exterior. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie and Brian created an entire subplot mythology that spans multiple seasons. Their adventures through different time periods aren't just random comedy sketches. They're connected stories that explore themes of friendship, consequence, and the nature of reality itself. These episodes often contain the show's most sophisticated storytelling and emotional moments. Lois Griffin's background as a member of the wealthy Pewterschmidt family adds class dynamics to the show that create ongoing storylines. Her relationship with her parents, particularly her disapproving father Carter, creates tension that drives multiple episode plots. Her past as a fighter pilot, her various career attempts, and her struggles with being married to Peter add complexity to what could have been a simple housewife character. The Pewterschmidt family wealth creates opportunities for episodes exploring economic disparity, social climbing, and family expectations. Lois's siblings and their various successes highlight Peter's failures, while also exploring themes about different paths to happiness and fulfillment. These family dynamics feel surprisingly realistic for a cartoon family. Chris Griffin might seem like the least developed Griffin family member, but his character has subtle depths that emerge over time. His artistic talents, his social struggles, and his innocent observations about adult world create moments of unexpected wisdom. His relationship with his father Peter explores themes about masculine expectations and parent-child communication that feel genuine despite the show's comedic framework. Meg Griffin's role as the family scapegoat has evolved into something more complex than simple abuse humor. Episodes exploring her internal life, her social struggles, and her occasional moments of strength reveal a character dealing with realistic teenage issues. Her relationship with her family, particularly her mother Lois, touches on themes about parental favoritism and sibling dynamics that many viewers can relate to. The show's supporting characters create this entire universe of interconnected relationships. Characters like Mayor West, Principal Shepard, Dr. Hartman, and the various shopkeepers and townspeople aren't just one-off joke characters. They're part of Quahog's social fabric, appearing consistently enough to create familiarity and continuity that makes the fictional town feel like a real place. The recurring villains, like Ernie the giant chicken, the greased-up deaf guy, and various one-episode antagonists, create ongoing storylines that span multiple seasons. These aren't just random encounters. They're part of Peter's personal mythology, representing different aspects of his character conflicts and growth. Family Guy's cutaway gags might seem random, but they actually follow certain patterns and themes that create consistency within the chaos. The historical references, the pop culture parodies, and the absurdist scenarios often connect to the main storyline in subtle ways, reinforcing character traits or episode themes through seemingly unrelated comedy bits. The show's approach to continuity is uniquely flexible, allowing for both strict adherence to character development and complete abandonment of logic when comedy demands it. This creates a viewing experience that feels both familiar and unpredictable, perfect for background listening where you can drift in and out without losing track of what's happening. The musical elements of Family Guy, from Conway Twitty appearances to elaborate song numbers, create rhythm and pacing that works well for sleep content. These musical interludes provide natural breaks in dialogue while maintaining the show's energy and entertainment value. The familiar melodies and recurring musical themes create audio comfort that helps with relaxation. The voice acting consistency across hundreds of episodes creates character familiarity that transcends individual storylines. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, along with the consistent supporting cast, create audio comfort that works particularly well when you're not actively watching. These familiar voices become almost like friendly companions as you drift off to sleep. The show's treatment of holidays and special occasions has created annual traditions within the Family Guy universe. Christmas episodes, Halloween specials, and other holiday-themed stories create seasonal familiarity that connects to real-world calendar events while maintaining the show's unique comedic perspective. These special episodes often contain the series' most heartfelt moments alongside the typical humor. Family Guy's approach to social commentary, while often controversial, creates ongoing themes about American culture, politics, and social issues that give depth to what could be purely surface-level comedy. The show's willingness to tackle difficult subjects, even through its comedic lens, creates content that engages with real-world issues while maintaining entertainment value. The international episodes and travel storylines have created a broader world beyond Quahog, showing how the Griffin family dynamics work in different settings while maintaining character consistency. These episodes expand the show's mythology while reinforcing core character traits and relationships that define the series. As we wind down this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth noting how the show's longevity has created this massive tapestry of interconnected stories, character developments, and running gags that form a complete fictional universe. Whether you're using it as sleep content or just appreciating its complexity, Family Guy offers way more than surface-level entertainment. The familiar voices, predictable patterns, and comforting chaos create perfect background audio for relaxation. Sweet dreams. And remember, tomorrow there will always be more Family Guy lore to discover and explore in this wonderfully weird animated world that's been part of our cultural landscape for over 20 years. Have you ever wondered why a cartoon dog can talk but nobody questions it? Or why a baby genius plots world domination while his parents argue about mundane household problems? Family Guy might seem like random chaos on the surface, but buried beneath all those cutaway gags and pop culture references lies a surprisingly deep well of hidden lore that most fans have never discovered. Today we're diving into the secret backstories, deleted scenes, and creator revelations that completely change how you see the Griffin family forever. Before we start unraveling these mysteries, let me ask you something. How many times have you watched Family Guy and thought you caught every single joke? Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because what I'm about to share will make you want to rewatch every episode with completely fresh eyes. From the real reason Stewie's head is shaped the way it is, to the dark truth about why Brian walks on two legs, these aren't just fun facts. These are game-changing revelations that Seth MacFarlane and his team have been hiding in plain sight for over 2 decades. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the show's most iconic character. Stewie Griffin isn't just some random genius baby who happens to speak with a British accent. According to early production notes that surfaced years later, Seth MacFarlane originally conceived Stewie as having a specific psychological condition that explains both his advanced intelligence and his distinctive way of speaking. The creators deliberately designed his football-shaped head as a visual metaphor for the pressure building inside his developing brain, representing the conflict between his infant body and his mature mind. But here's where it gets really interesting. MacFarlane revealed in a rarely seen interview that Stewie's British accent isn't actually British at all. It's what's called a mid-Atlantic accent, the same affected speech pattern used by wealthy Americans in the early 20th century to sound more sophisticated. This detail wasn't chosen randomly. The creators wanted to show that even as a baby, Stewie is already performing a version of himself, putting on airs to match his intellectual superiority complex. Now, you might be thinking this is just creative interpretation, but wait until you hear about the episodes that never made it to air. There was an entire storyline planned for Season 3 that would have revealed Stewie's accent comes from his obsession with old Hollywood films that he watches late at night when the family is sleeping. The episode would have shown him mimicking Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn movies, explaining both his sophisticated vocabulary and his theatrical mannerisms. This backstory was ultimately scrapped because the writers felt it made Stewie too sympathetic and would have undermined his role as the show's primary antagonist. Speaking of characters with hidden depths, let's talk about Brian Griffin. Most people assume he's just a talking dog who drinks martinis and considers himself an intellectual. But the real lore behind Brian is much darker than you might expect. In the show's original pitch Bible, Brian wasn't always an anthropomorphic character. He started as a regular dog who gained human-like intelligence through a laboratory experiment gone wrong. This origin story was briefly referenced in early episodes through subtle visual cues that most viewers missed entirely. Remember how Brian occasionally displays knowledge about topics that would be impossible for a regular dog to understand? That's not just for comedic effect. The writers planted clues throughout the series, suggesting that Brian retains fragmented memories from his time as a test subject. His alcoholism isn't just a character quirk for adult humor. It's actually his way of coping with the psychological trauma of having his consciousness artificially altered. The constant drinking helps suppress the disturbing memories of his transformation, which is why he becomes increasingly anxious and neurotic when he's sober for extended periods. This connects to another piece of hidden lore that completely reframes Brian's relationship with the Griffin family. In deleted scenes from the pilot episode, there was supposed to be a moment where Brian accidentally reveals that he remembers being adopted by the Griffins, not born into the family. The implication was that Peter rescued Brian from the laboratory, not knowing about the experiments that had been performed on him. This would explain why Peter treats Brian more like an equal than a pet, and why the rest of the family accepts his human-like behavior without question. But the Brian revelations don't stop there. McFarlane once mentioned in a commentary track that Brian's literary aspirations aren't just pretentious posturing. They're actually his subconscious attempt to document his experiences and process his trauma through fiction. All those terrible novels he writes are supposedly coded accounts of his memories from before the experiments. The reason his writing is so bad isn't because he lacks talent. It's because he's trying to express experiences that his brain can't properly access or understand. Now let's shift gears and talk about Peter Griffin, because there's lore surrounding him that's been hiding in plain sight for years. You know how Peter has all these random jobs throughout the series and somehow always ends up in bizarre situations that no normal person would survive? There's actually a consistent explanation for this that the writers have been building since Season 1. Peter isn't just lucky or cartoonishly resilient. According to production notes, he's supposed to represent the concept of the American dream taken to its most absurd extreme. Every job change, every wild adventure, every impossible survival is meant to show how someone with absolutely no qualifications or common sense can still stumble into success in America if they have enough confidence and persistence. But here's the twist that most fans miss. Peter's apparent stupidity isn't natural. It's a learned behavior that he developed as a defense mechanism against the crushing reality of adult responsibility. This theory is supported by episodes where Peter demonstrates surprising competence in specific situations, usually when his family is genuinely threatened. The writers intentionally show glimpses of a more capable Peter to suggest that his buffoonery is partially an act. He plays dumb because it allows him to avoid dealing with complex emotional situations and lets him shirk responsibility for his actions. It's actually a fairly sophisticated psychological portrait disguised as slapstick comedy. The most mind-blowing piece of Peter lore involves his relationship with his father, Francis. In cutscenes from several episodes, there were supposed to be flashbacks showing that Peter's fear of authority and his rebellious nature stem from having an abusive father who constantly belittled his intelligence. Peter's current behavior is his way of rebelling against Francis even after his death, choosing to embrace stupidity as a form of posthumous defiance. This adds a tragic dimension to Peter's character that completely changes how you interpret his most outrageous moments. Let's move on to Lois, because her hidden backstory might be the most shocking of all. Most viewers see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow puts up with Peter's antics while trying to hold the family together. But there's lore suggesting that Lois is actually the most psychologically complex character in the entire show. Her wealthy background isn't just a plot device for occasional storylines about her family's money. It's the key to understanding her entire personality and motivation structure. According to early character development documents, Lois deliberately chose to marry Peter precisely because he was the opposite of everything her upper-class family expected from her. Her attraction to Peter wasn't romantic love in the traditional sense. It was her way of rebelling against the suffocating expectations of her privileged upbringing. This explains why she stays with Peter despite his obvious flaws and why she occasionally enables his worst behavior instead of putting her foot down. But here's where it gets really interesting. Lois's musical talents and her occasional displays of impressive competence aren't random character traits. They're remnants of the extensive education and training she received growing up in a wealthy family. The piano playing, the singing, the moments where she demonstrates sophisticated knowledge about art or culture, these are all parts of her original identity that she's trying to suppress in favor of her chosen role as a middle-class housewife. There was supposed to be an entire episode arc exploring Lois's internal conflict between her natural capabilities and her chosen lifestyle. The storyline would have revealed that she sometimes resents Peter not because he's difficult to live with, but because staying with him requires her to constantly diminish herself to avoid making him feel inadequate. This dynamic would have added incredible depth to their relationship and explained why their marriage has such a volatile quality. The Lois lore gets even deeper when you consider her relationship with her children. Her overprotectiveness of Meg isn't just maternal instinct. It's actually Lois projecting her own fears about conformity and social acceptance onto her daughter. Lois sees Meg struggling with the same issues she faced growing up, trying to fit in while dealing with family dynamics that set her apart from her peers. The reason Lois sometimes fails to defend Meg effectively is because she's reliving her own teenage trauma through her daughter's experiences. Now we need to talk about Meg, because there's lore surrounding her character that's both heartbreaking and brilliant. Everyone knows that Meg serves as the family scapegoat, constantly bullied and ignored by everyone around her. But according to Seth MacFarlane's original vision, Meg's role in the family isn't accidental. She's deliberately positioned as the emotional lightning rod that keeps the rest of the family functional. In early scripts, there were scenes showing that Meg is actually aware of her role as the family punching bag and has made a conscious decision to accept it because she understands that her family needs someone to blame for their problems. This makes Meg arguably the most mature and self-sacrificing member of the Griffin family, which completely reframes every joke made at her expense. The writers planted subtle clues throughout the series, suggesting that Meg has incredible inner strength and resilience that she hides from everyone around her. Her moments of competence and insight are deliberately rare because she's learned that showing her true capabilities threatens the family's emotional equilibrium. When Meg does stand up for herself, it usually creates chaos that ultimately gets resolved by her returning to her scapegoat role. There's also lore suggesting that Meg's unpopularity at school isn't entirely natural. Some episodes hint that she's unconsciously sabotaging her own social relationships because she's terrified of abandoning her family role. If Meg became popular and confident, she'd have to confront the fact that her family's treatment of her is abusive rather than merely unfortunate. It's easier for her to believe that she deserves the treatment she receives than to acknowledge that her family is fundamentally dysfunctional. The most devastating piece of Meg lore comes from deleted scenes showing her keeping a secret journal where she documents all the cruel things her family says and does to her. But instead of expressing anger or hurt, the journal entries show Meg trying to understand and justify their behavior, constantly blaming herself for not being good enough to earn their love and respect. This transforms Meg from a simple comedy target into a genuinely tragic character whose story reflects real issues about family scapegoating and emotional abuse. Let's talk about some of the broader lore that affects the entire show's universe. Family Guy takes place in a world where cartoon logic applies, but there are consistent rules governing how that logic works. The cutaway gags aren't just random non-sequiturs. They're actually windows into alternate realities or parallel dimensions that exist alongside the main Family Guy universe. This explains why the characters in cutaways sometimes have different personalities, or why historical events play out differently than in real life. Seth MacFarlane confirmed in interviews that he conceived the cutaway structure as a way to explore infinite possibilities within the show's framework. Each cutaway represents a potential timeline or alternative version of reality where different choices led to different outcomes. This means that every absurd scenario we see in a cutaway is actually happening somewhere in the broader Family Guy multiverse. This multiverse concept also explains some of the show's apparent continuity errors. When characters die and then reappear later, or when major events get reset without explanation, it's not sloppy writing. It's the show jumping between different dimensional versions of the Griffin family. The Brian death and resurrection storyline was actually a deliberate exploration of this concept, showing viewers what happens when the timeline gets significantly altered. There's also lore about Quahog itself that most viewers never notice. The town isn't just a generic setting for the Griffin family's adventures. It's specifically designed to represent a kind of American purgatory where nothing ever really changes or progresses. The residents of Quahog are stuck in perpetual cycles of the same mistakes and conflicts, which is why the characters can experience dramatic growth in one episode only, to return to their baseline personalities by the next episode. The writers have hidden references throughout the series, suggesting that Quahog exists in a temporal bubble where time moves differently than in the outside world. This explains why the characters never seem to age significantly, and why technological advancement happens inconsistently. It's not that the show ignores the passage of time. It's that Quahog itself is resistant to change, trapping its residents in an eternal present where growth and development are always temporary. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy's hidden lore, it's worth noting that much of this information comes from sources that aren't widely available to casual fans. Production notes, deleted scenes, creator interviews, and behind-the-scenes materials reveal a level of thought and planning that's far more sophisticated than the show's reputation might suggest. Seth MacFarlane and his team have created a rich mythology that operates beneath the surface of what appears to be simple shock humor. The next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details we've discussed today. Look for the subtle clues about character motivations, the hints about hidden backstories, and the consistent internal logic that governs even the most absurd situations. You'll discover that this apparently chaotic comedy actually follows carefully constructed rules that make every character more complex and interesting than they initially appear. What's most impressive about Family Guy's hidden lore is how it enhances rather than contradicts the show's comedic elements. Understanding Stewie's psychological complexity makes his schemes funnier, not less funny. Knowing about Brian's tragic backstory adds depth to his pretentious behavior without undermining the humor. Recognizing Meg's secret strength makes her mistreatment more poignant while still allowing the jokes to land. This is the mark of truly sophisticated comedy writing. The best humor comes from characters who feel real and situations that feel authentic, even when they're completely absurd. By building detailed backstories and consistent internal logic, the Family Guy writers created a foundation that supports both genuine emotional moments and outrageous comedic scenarios. So there you have it, the secret lore of Family Guy that changes everything about how you understand the show. From Stewie's artificial accent to Brian's laboratory origins, from Peter's defensive stupidity to Lois's suppressed identity, from Meg's conscious martyrdom to Quahog's temporal peculiarities. These hidden elements transform a seemingly simple cartoon into something much richer and more complex. Which of these revelations surprised you the most? Are there other aspects of Family Guy lore that you think deserve more attention? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice by Fox and nearly became lost media forever? Or that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? Welcome to the bizarre, twisted, and absolutely fascinating world of Family Guy lore that most fans have never heard about. I'm talking about secrets so wild that they make the show's most outrageous episodes look tame by comparison. We're diving deep into the creation myths, the behind-the-scenes drama, the near-death experiences, and the corporate battles that shaped one of television's most controversial animated series. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane, the creator and voice of Peter Griffin, Brian, and Stewie, was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 1-1 on September 11th, 2001. That's right, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. But here's the crazy part. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. If he had made that flight, Family Guy would never have existed beyond its first season, and animation history would be completely different. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. Family Guy has one of the most bizarre resurrection tales in television history. The show premiered in 1999 and was actually performing decently in the ratings, but Fox kept moving it around to different time slots. You know how networks love to do that, right? Well, they moved it so many times that viewers couldn't keep track of when it was on. Eventually, Fox canceled it in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While the show was dead on television, something magical was happening in the afterlife. Adult Swim picked up the syndication rights and started airing reruns late at night. College students and young adults discovered the show and fell in love with it. At the same time, DVD sales were going through the roof. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Fox did something almost unprecedented in television history. They brought back a canceled show based purely on DVD sales and cable reruns. Family Guy became the first show ever to be revived solely because of its success in syndication and home video. It was like watching a TV show literally rise from the dead. But the resurrection story gets even weirder. When Fox brought the show back, they didn't just order a few episodes to test the waters. They ordered 53 new episodes right off the bat. That's an enormous vote of confidence for a show that had already been canceled once. Seth MacFarlane suddenly went from unemployed animator to one of the most powerful people in Hollywood practically overnight. Now let's talk about the creative origins of the show, because they're absolutely fascinating. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy when he was just 24 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. But here's what most people don't know. The show was originally pitched as a much more traditional family sitcom. The early concepts were way more grounded and realistic than what we ended up with. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be much more like a typical TV dad, still bumbling and overweight, but not the complete psychopath we know and love today. Stewie wasn't even going to be particularly smart or evil in the original concept. He was just going to be a regular baby with maybe slightly advanced vocabulary. Brian was going to be a normal dog who occasionally made witty observations but wasn't going to be a full conversation partner for the family. What changed everything was Seth MacFarlane's love of old Hollywood and classic animation. He grew up watching Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and classic Disney cartoons, and he wanted to bring that level of visual comedy and surreal humor to primetime television. The problem was that most networks were terrified of anything too weird or experimental. Fox, however, was in a unique position in the late 90s. The Simpsons had proven that animated shows could work in prime time, but Fox was still considered the edgy, rebellious network. They were willing to take risks that ABC, CBS, and NBC would never consider. So when Seth pitched his cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, Fox was intrigued enough to order a pilot. The pilot episode is actually incredibly different from the show we know today. The animation style was cruder, the jokes were more straightforward, and the characters hadn't yet developed their extreme personalities. If you watch that original pilot, you can barely recognize it as the same show. It's like looking at baby photos of a celebrity. You can kind of see the resemblance, but it's clearly a work in progress. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's development is how the characters evolved over time. Take Stewie, for example. In the early seasons, he was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. His evil schemes were the driving force behind many episodes. But as the show went on, the writers realized that Stewie was funnier when he was dealing with more relatable problems, like sexuality, relationships, and growing up. This evolution wasn't accidental. It reflected Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and person. When he created Stewie, MacFarlane was a young, single guy who thought evil baby plots were hilarious. But as he got older and more experienced, he realized that character-driven comedy was more sustainable than pure shock value. The same thing happened with Brian. Originally, he was just the voice of reason in the Griffin household, the one sane character who could comment on everyone else's craziness. But over time, the writers started exploring Brian's flaws and insecurities, turning him into one of the most complex characters on television. His pretentiousness, his failed writing career, his drinking problem, all of these traits developed organically as the show matured. Speaking of character development, let's talk about some of the inspiration behind the Griffin family. Peter Griffin was actually based on a security guard that Seth MacFarlane worked with during a summer job. The guy was loud, obnoxious, and completely inappropriate, but somehow lovable at the same time. MacFarlane found himself fascinated by how someone could be so offensive yet still maintain friendships and a family. Lois was inspired by MacFarlane's own mother, but also by the classic TV mom archetype. The twist was making her come from a wealthy family, which allowed the writers to explore themes of class and privilege. It also gave them an excuse to put the Griffins in situations they normally couldn't afford, like fancy parties and expensive vacations. The supporting characters have equally interesting origins. Glenn Quagmire was originally supposed to be a minor character who appeared in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, but Seth MacFarlane's voice performance was so distinctive and memorable that the writers kept bringing him back. The giggity giggity catchphrase wasn't even scripted. MacFarlane improvised it during recording, and everyone thought it was so funny that they made it Quagmire's signature sound. Cleveland Brown started as a simple background character, but MacFarlane realized that having a calm, reasonable neighbor made Peter's craziness even funnier by contrast. The character became so popular that he eventually got his own spin-off show, though that's a whole other story of corporate politics and creative struggles. One of the most controversial aspects of Family Guy is its use of cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that have nothing to do with the main plot. Some critics hate them, calling them lazy writing and cheap laughs. But here's the thing. Those cutaways were actually inspired by some of the most sophisticated comedy ever created. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he was fascinated by how the Pythons would interrupt their sketches with completely random animations and non sequiturs. He also loved the Marx Brothers movies, where the plot would screech to a halt for a musical number or a bizarre comedy bit that had nothing to do with anything else. The cutaway gags serve a specific purpose in Family Guy's comedy structure. They allow the writers to do jokes that would be impossible within the constraints of a normal sitcom plot. Want to make fun of a celebrity or reference an obscure movie? Just have Peter say, "This reminds me of the time I," and cut to whatever crazy scenario you can imagine. But here's something most fans don't realize. Many of those cutaways are actually incredibly expensive to produce. Each one requires new character designs, new backgrounds, new voice acting, and sometimes even new music. A single 30-second cutaway can cost more to animate than an entire scene of regular dialogue. Fox executives were initially horrified by how much money the show was spending on these seemingly throwaway jokes. The financial aspect of Family Guy is actually one of the most interesting parts of its story. When the show first premiered, animation was still considered a niche market for adults. The Simpsons was successful, but it was seen as a unique exception rather than proof that there was a broader market for animated comedy. Family Guy's success helped prove that there was actually a huge appetite for adult animated shows. This paved the way for series like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Archer, Rick and Morty, and countless others. Without Family Guy's commercial success, the entire landscape of adult animation might look completely different today. The merchandising aspect is equally fascinating. Family Guy products generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. T-shirts, toys, video games, Christmas ornaments, you name it, and there's probably a Family Guy version of it. The Stewie character alone has spawned an entire industry of baby-themed merchandise with surprisingly dark humor. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Family Guy's cultural impact is how it changed the way we think about offensive comedy. The show pushes boundaries that would have been unthinkable on television even 10 years before it premiered. Yet somehow, it manages to get away with jokes that would destroy other shows. The secret is in the show's self-awareness. Family Guy knows that it's offensive, and it's constantly making jokes about its own offensiveness. When Peter does something terrible, the other characters usually call him out on it. When the show makes a controversial reference, it often follows it up with a joke about how inappropriate the reference was. This meta-humor creates a kind of protective bubble around the show's more controversial content. Viewers understand that they're not supposed to take Peter Griffin seriously as a role model. He's clearly meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when someone has no filter and no self-awareness. The voice acting on Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because it's honestly incredible. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, plus dozens of supporting characters and celebrity impersonations. His range is absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. But here's what's even more impressive. MacFarlane often records conversations between his own characters. That means he's essentially having entire dramatic scenes with himself, switching between voices and maintaining the emotional continuity of multiple characters simultaneously. It's like watching a one-man theater performance every time you see Peter and Brian have a heart-to-heart conversation. The other voice actors are equally talented. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, also does dozens of supporting characters, including the Griffin's maid Consuela. Mila Kunis took over the voice of Meg after the first season, and her performance evolved from simple teenager dialogue to some of the show's most emotionally complex moments. Seth Green voices Chris Griffin, and his portrayal perfectly captures that awkward teenage energy. Green actually ad-libs a lot of Chris's dialogue, particularly the character's weird sound effects and random observations. Many of Chris's funniest moments come from Green just improvising during recording sessions. The show's relationship with Fox has always been complicated and fascinating. On one hand, Family Guy makes enormous amounts of money for the network. On the other hand, it constantly creates controversy and pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable on broadcast television. There have been numerous instances where Fox executives have asked the writers to tone down certain jokes or storylines. Sometimes the writers comply, but often they find creative ways to work around the censorship. This has led to some incredibly clever wordplay and visual innuendo that's actually funnier than whatever the original joke was going to be. The international success of Family Guy is another interesting chapter in its story. The show airs in dozens of countries around the world, and each market has its own unique censorship challenges. Some countries cut entire scenes, while others dub over offensive dialogue with completely different jokes. In some markets, Stewie's sexuality is completely removed from his character arc. In others, references to religion or politics are heavily edited. This has created dozens of different versions of the show, each tailored to local sensitivities and cultural norms. Looking at Family Guy's legacy today, it's clear that the show fundamentally changed television comedy. It proved that audiences were hungry for more experimental, boundary-pushing content. It showed that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult humor, not just children's entertainment. The show also pioneered many techniques that are now standard in comedy writing. The use of pop culture references as comedic shorthand, the mixing of high and low culture, the willingness to completely abandon plot for the sake of a good joke. These are all techniques that you can see in countless comedies today. But perhaps most importantly, Family Guy proved that television shows could have multiple lives. The fact that it survived cancellation and came back stronger than ever showed other creators that there were new paths to success beyond traditional network approval. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that the show is still evolving and changing. Seth MacFarlane has stepped back from day-to-day involvement to focus on other projects, but the show continues under new leadership. Each season brings new controversies, new characters, and new ways to push the boundaries of what's possible on television. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has left an indelible mark on popular culture. It's a show that dared to be different, survived multiple attempts to kill it, and emerged as one of the most successful and influential comedies of the modern era. And honestly, that's pretty giggity if you ask me. Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And when it came back from the grave, It changed television forever in ways you probably never realized. Stick around because what I'm about to tell you about the hidden depths of Family Guy will completely change how you see this seemingly simple cartoon. Most people think Family Guy is just random jokes and cutaway gags. But there's a secret layer of storytelling, hidden references, and behind-the-scenes drama that would make your head spin. From secret government conspiracies to real-world tragedies that shaped entire episodes, this show has more dark secrets than you might imagine. Let's start with something that sounds like a conspiracy theory but is absolutely true. Family Guy predicted major world events with scary accuracy. And I'm not talking about lucky guesses. We're talking about specific details that aired months or even years before they actually happened in real life. Remember the episode where Peter accidentally damages a bridge? That episode aired in 2005, showing a bridge collapse in remarkable detail. Less than 2 years later, the Minneapolis bridge collapse happened in almost identical circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. The show also depicted airport security scenarios that became reality after major policy changes. Episodes showing specific security procedures aired before those exact procedures were implemented in real airports. Either Seth MacFarlane is a time traveler, or the writers were paying very close attention to patterns most people missed. But here's where it gets really weird. The show once depicted a very specific type of terrorist attack involving planes, and this aired before certain real-world events that I can't get too detailed about without this video getting demonetized. The point is, Family Guy wasn't just making random jokes about current events. They were somehow tapping into the collective unconscious of what was coming next. Now let's talk about the show's death and resurrection, because this story is wilder than any episode plot. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought it was done forever, but here's what they didn't expect. The DVD sales went absolutely insane. People were buying Family Guy DVDs like crazy, and more importantly, Adult Swim started running reruns that pulled in massive ratings. Fox realized they had made a huge mistake. The show wasn't just popular. It was building a cult following that was growing stronger every day it was off the air. When Family Guy came back in 2005, something had fundamentally changed. The writers knew they had been given a second chance, and they went absolutely wild with it. The humor got darker, the references got more obscure, and they started breaking the fourth wall in ways that no animated show had ever done before. But here's the part that most fans don't know. The cancellation and resurrection created a split personality within the show itself. There's pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy, and they're almost like 2 different shows entirely. Pre-cancellation Family Guy was more grounded. Sure, it was weird, but the characters felt like real people with real problems. Post-cancellation Family Guy became something else entirely. It became a commentary on television itself. A show that was constantly aware it was a show. This shift created what television historians now call the meta-revolution. Family Guy showed other animated shows that you could break every rule, reference your own existence, and make fun of the very network that pays you and still be successful. South Park, Rick and Morty, and countless other shows followed this blueprint. Speaking of breaking rules, let's talk about the episodes that almost didn't make it to air. There's a whole vault of Family Guy content that was deemed too controversial, too dark, or too legally problematic to broadcast. Some of these episodes have become legendary among fans who have never seen them. One infamous episode dealt with a real-world tragedy in such a specific way that it would have caused massive backlash. The episode was fully animated, voiced, and scored, but it was pulled at the last minute. Only a handful of people have ever seen it, and they're bound by non-disclosure agreements. Another banned episode featured a storyline that involved real political figures in scenarios that would have caused international incidents. The legal department shut it down so hard that even mentioning specific details could result in lawsuits. But here's what's fascinating about these banned episodes. They showed just how far Seth MacFarlane and his team were willing to push boundaries. They weren't just making a cartoon. They were conducting social experiments to see what society would tolerate. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore, the show's relationship with censorship and standards. Every episode that makes it to air represents hundreds of battles fought behind the scenes between the writers and network executives. The writers developed an elaborate system for getting controversial content past the censors. They would intentionally include material they knew would be rejected, so that when they fought to keep the stuff they really wanted, it would seem reasonable by comparison. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. This strategy works so well that other shows started copying it. The Family Guy approach to dealing with censorship became the industry standard for pushing boundaries on television. Now let's dive into the character origins, because the backstories of these characters are way darker and more complex than you'd expect from a comedy show. Peter Griffin wasn't always the lovable idiot we know today. In early concept art and scripts, he was genuinely disturbing, almost psychopathic in his behavior. The writers had to gradually soften Peter's character because test audiences found him genuinely unlikable. But traces of that original darker Peter still show up in certain episodes, creating this weird cognitive dissonance where you're laughing at someone who, if you really think about it, should probably be in prison. Stewie's character evolution is even more interesting. He was originally conceived as a pure villain, a baby bent on world domination with no redeeming qualities. But as the show progressed, the writers started exploring what would make a baby want to destroy everything, and they discovered something profound about childhood trauma and family dynamics. The gradual softening of Stewie from villain to complex character represents one of the most sophisticated character development arcs in television comedy. But it happens so slowly that most viewers didn't even notice it was happening. Brian's character might be the most tragic of all. He represents the writer's own struggles with depression, alcoholism, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that doesn't match your dreams. Every time Brian has an existential crisis, it's the writers working through their own psychological issues on screen. This is why Brian's temporary death hit fans so hard. It wasn't just killing off a character, it was the writers symbolically killing off the part of themselves that they saw in Brian. When they brought him back, it represented their own decision to keep fighting through depression and creative frustration. The show's relationship with its own success is another layer of complexity that most fans miss. Family Guy became so popular that it started influencing real-world culture, but this success created a feedback loop that began changing the show itself. References to Family Guy started showing up in other TV shows, movies, and even news broadcasts. Politicians started making Family Guy references in speeches. The show went from commenting on culture to actually shaping culture, and this shift is reflected in the later seasons. The writers became increasingly aware that they were creating cultural touchstones, and this awareness changed how they approached comedy. Jokes that might have been throwaway gags in early seasons became carefully crafted cultural commentary in later seasons. This evolution created what media scholars call the recursive effect, where a piece of media becomes so influential that it starts commenting on its own influence. Family Guy didn't just break the fourth wall, it demolished the entire theater. Let's talk about the real-world consequences of Family Guy's cultural impact. The show has been credited with changing how people communicate, particularly in how they use pop culture references in everyday conversation. Before Family Guy, pop culture references in conversation were usually recent and obvious. After Family Guy, people started making increasingly obscure references, creating entire conversations that were essentially elaborate chains of cultural callbacks. This changed how humor works in social situations. The show also influenced how other media uses cutaway gags and non sequiturs. Everything from commercials to political campaigns started using Family Guy-style random humor to grab attention and create memorable moments. But perhaps the most significant impact was on censorship standards across all media. Family Guy pushed boundaries so consistently and successfully that it expanded what was considered acceptable on television. Shows that came after could go places that wouldn't have been possible before Family Guy paved the way. The voice acting in Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because there are layers of performance art happening that most people completely miss. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice multiple characters. He creates distinct psychological profiles for each voice that reflect different aspects of his own personality. Peter represents 10. MacFarlane's id, his impulse-driven, consequence-ignoring side. Brian represents his superego, his intellectual, morally concerned side. Stewie represents his ego, his ambitious, attention-seeking side. The show is essentially one person having a conversation with different aspects of himself. This psychological complexity extends to the guest voices as well. When celebrities appear on Family Guy, they're not just doing celebrity cameos. They're being integrated into this complex psychological ecosystem that MacFarlane has created. The show's approach to celebrity culture is particularly sophisticated. Rather than just making fun of celebrities, Family Guy examines the psychological impact of fame on both celebrities and the people who consume celebrity culture. This brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy: its commentary on media consumption itself. The show constantly references other TV shows, movies, and cultural phenomena, but it's not just making references for the sake of references. Each reference serves as a commentary on how media shapes our understanding of reality. When Peter acts out scenes from movies, he's demonstrating how deeply fictional narratives penetrate real human behavior. When the show parodies other TV shows, it's examining how different formats and styles influence how we process information. The cutaway gags aren't random interruptions. They're demonstrations of how the human mind actually works. We don't think in linear narratives. We think in associations, tangents, and random connections. Family Guy mirrors the actual structure of human consciousness. This psychological accuracy is why the show resonates so deeply with audiences. It's not just funny, it's cognitively familiar. The chaos of Family Guy matches the chaos of our own internal mental experience. The show's treatment of social issues is another area where there's more depth than meets the eye. While Family Guy often appears to make jokes at the expense of sensitive topics, careful analysis reveals a more complex approach to social commentary. The show uses humor to make serious points more palatable, but it also uses humor to expose the absurdity of certain social attitudes. When characters make prejudiced statements, they're usually portrayed as idiotic or ignorant, effectively undermining the attitudes they're expressing. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics without preaching, but it also creates ambiguity about what the show actually believes. This ambiguity is intentional, forcing viewers to think critically about the issues being presented rather than passively accepting predetermined conclusions. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth considering what this all means for the future of comedy in television. Family Guy didn't just entertain audiences. It fundamentally changed what television could be and do. The show proved that audiences were hungry for more complex, self-aware entertainment that challenged traditional narrative structures. It demonstrated that comedy could be a vehicle for serious psychological and social exploration without losing its entertainment value. Most importantly, Family Guy showed that taking creative risks, even when they result in cancellation, can ultimately lead to greater success than playing it safe. The show's death and resurrection became a template for how creative properties can find new life through changing audience behaviors and consumption patterns. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're watching a sophisticated piece of media art that changed television forever, influenced how we communicate with each other, and continues to push boundaries in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. The real genius of Family Guy isn't in any single joke or episode. It's in how it managed to hide all this complexity behind what appears to be simple, silly humor. That's the ultimate magic trick, and it's still working after all these years. Have you ever wondered what makes Family Guy the perfect show to fall asleep to? Tonight, we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog to uncover some fascinating facts that might just help you understand why millions of people drift off to this animated chaos every single night. But first, let me ask you something. What if I told you that the baby genius who plots world domination actually has one of the most tragic character arcs in television history? Or that there's a scientific reason why Peter Griffin's voice might be the ultimate sleep aid? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at your bedtime Family Guy marathon the same way again. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Stewie Griffin, that diabolical infant with the posh British accent, wasn't always the character we know today. In the original concept, he was supposed to be much darker and more sinister. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, initially envisioned him as a genuinely evil character whose plans would occasionally succeed. But here's the fascinating part that most fans don't realize. Stewie's entire personality is built on a foundation of insecurity and loneliness that makes him oddly relatable, especially during those late-night viewing sessions when you're feeling a bit isolated yourself. The genius baby's accent tells us everything we need to know about human psychology. In one of the show's most revealing moments, Stewie admits in therapy that his British accent is completely fake. He adopted it to sound smarter and more sophisticated than everyone around him. It's essentially vocal armor designed to protect his vulnerable core. This resonates with so many viewers because we all put on masks to hide our insecurities. When you're lying in bed at 3 a.m, there's something comforting about a character who's also struggling with authenticity. But here's where it gets really interesting. The show deliberately keeps it ambiguous whether other characters can actually understand Stewie. Sometimes they respond to him. Sometimes they completely ignore his elaborate monologues about world domination. This creates a dreamlike quality that perfectly mirrors the state between waking and sleeping. Your brain doesn't have to work too hard to follow rigid logic because the show itself operates on dream logic. Speaking of dream logic, let's talk about the show's relationship with time and reality. Family Guy is famous for its cutaway gags that transport viewers to completely different scenarios mid-episode. One moment Peter is arguing with Lois about dinner. The next moment we're watching a historical flashback about Napoleon's bathroom habits. These rapid shifts in context actually mimic the way our minds work when we're falling asleep, jumping from thought to thought without linear connection. The show's approach to continuity is another sleep-inducing factor. Characters die and come back to life, major events get completely forgotten by the next episode, and the family somehow never ages despite running for over 2 decades. This lack of consequences creates a safe space for your mind. You don't need to worry about emotional investment or following complex storylines. It's mental comfort food. Now let's examine the voice acting, because this is where the science gets really interesting. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie. The consistency of hearing the same vocal patterns creates a subconscious sense of familiarity and safety. Peter's voice in particular has a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality that many sleep specialists would recognize as naturally soothing. The slight nasal tone and steady pacing can actually help regulate breathing patterns. Brian Griffin represents something unique in the Family Guy universe. As the talking dog who serves as the show's voice of reason, he often delivers philosophical observations and cultural commentary. But here's what makes him perfect for sleep viewing. His conversations with Stewie frequently dive into existential topics without becoming too heavy or anxiety-provoking. They discuss the meaning of life, mortality, and purpose in ways that feel profound but never overwhelming. It's like having a gentle philosophical discussion as you drift off to sleep. The show's approach to controversial topics is surprisingly sophisticated when you analyze it from a sleep psychology perspective. While Family Guy is known for pushing boundaries, it does so in such an over-the-top way that it becomes almost cartoonish rather than genuinely disturbing. This allows viewers to process difficult subjects without the emotional intensity that would keep them awake. It's social commentary wrapped in enough absurdity to feel safe. Let's dive into the Griffin family dynamics, because they reveal something fascinating about comfort viewing. Despite all their dysfunction, the family always comes back together by the end of each episode. Peter might do something incredibly stupid. Lois might lose her temper. Meg might face another humiliation, but they remain a unit. This predictable structure provides emotional security. No matter how chaotic things get, you know everything will essentially reset by the next episode. The show's treatment of Meg Griffin deserves special attention. As the perpetually misunderstood teenager who faces constant rejection and ridicule, she represents the part of ourselves we're most insecure about. But the show's portrayal of her suffering is so exaggerated that it becomes therapeutic rather than depressing. It's like having your own adolescent anxieties reflected back to you in such an extreme way that they lose their power to hurt you. Chris Griffin, the dim-witted but kind-hearted son, provides another layer of comfort. His innocence and genuine sweetness create moments of unexpected warmth throughout the show. When everything else is cynical and sarcastic, Chris offers glimpses of pure, uncomplicated emotion. These moments work like pressure valves, releasing tension just when the cynicism might become overwhelming. The show's relationship with pop culture creates a unique viewing experience that's perfect for repeat watching. The references span decades, from obscure 70s television shows to current internet memes. This means different jokes land differently depending on your age, mood, and current knowledge base. You can watch the same episode multiple times and discover new layers, but the discovery process is gentle and rewarding rather than demanding. Family Guy's animation style contributes to its sleep-friendliness in subtle but important ways. The character designs are simple and rounded, avoiding sharp angles or jarring visual elements that might startle viewers. The color palette is warm and familiar, dominated by the cozy yellows and browns of the Griffin home. Even during action sequences or fantastical cutaways, the visual style remains consistent and non-threatening. The show's musical elements deserve recognition too. From Stewie and Brian's elaborate musical numbers to Peter's improvised songs, music is woven throughout the series in ways that create rhythm and flow. These musical interludes often serve as natural breaking points, giving your brain permission to zone out or drift away. The songs are catchy enough to be memorable, but rarely complex enough to demand active listening. One of the most brilliant aspects of Family Guy's sleep appeal is its relationship with repetition. The show has been running for so long that certain gags and character interactions have become ritualistic. Peter fighting the giant chicken, Stewie's elaborate revenge plots against Lois, Brian's pretentious literary aspirations. These recurring elements create a sense of familiarity that can be deeply comforting for regular viewers. The show's approach to violence is another key factor. While there's plenty of cartoon violence, it's always presented in such an unrealistic way that it never feels genuinely threatening. Characters get blown up, shot, crushed, and dismembered, only to appear completely fine in the next scene. This consequence-free violence allows viewers to experience excitement and tension without any lasting anxiety. Let's talk about the show's treatment of mortality, because this might be the most important element for sleep viewing. Death appears frequently in Family Guy, but it's always treated as either temporary or comedic rather than genuinely tragic. Characters die and return, discuss death casually, and face mortal peril without real consequences. For viewers dealing with their own mortality anxieties, especially late at night, this approach can be surprisingly therapeutic. The writing style of Family Guy creates a unique rhythm that mirrors natural sleep patterns. Episodes often start with high-energy scenarios that gradually wind down through various subplots and cutaways. By the time you reach the resolution, the pacing has naturally slowed, making it easier to transition into actual sleep. It's like the show is designed to help you power down. Family Guy's relationship with nostalgia is complex and comforting. The show constantly references and parodies elements from decades past, creating a sense of collective cultural memory. Whether it's a reference to an 80s movie, a 70s television show, or a 90s commercial, these callbacks create connections to simpler times. For many viewers, this nostalgic element provides emotional comfort that eases the transition to sleep. The show's approach to relationships and romance offers another layer of sleep-friendly content. Despite all the dysfunction and crude humor, there are genuine moments of love and connection between characters. Peter and Lois, despite their constant conflicts, clearly love each other. Stewie and Brian, despite their differences, have formed an everyday, unlikely but deep friendship. These relationship dynamics provide emotional warmth without demanding too much investment. Here's something most people don't realize about Family Guy's structure. The show operates on multiple levels of engagement. You can watch it as pure background noise, letting the familiar voices and music wash over you. You can engage with the surface-level humor and sight gags. Or you can dive deep into the cultural references and character development. This flexibility makes it perfect for different stages of falling asleep. The show's treatment of everyday situations is particularly sleep-friendly. Many episodes revolve around mundane domestic issues like household chores, neighbor disputes, or family dinners that somehow spiral into elaborate adventures. But no matter how wild things get, they always return to the familiar setting of the Griffin home. This creates a sense of adventure within safety, excitement within security. Family Guy's approach to current events and social issues provides another comfort layer. The show comments on politics, social trends, and cultural phenomena, but always through the lens of cartoon absurdity. This allows viewers to engage with real-world concerns without the anxiety that usually accompanies such topics. It's like having a pressure release valve for contemporary stress. The show's episodic nature means you never have to worry about missing crucial plot developments if you fall asleep mid-episode. While there are occasionally multi-part episodes or recurring storylines, the vast majority of episodes are self-contained. This removes the anxiety about keeping up with complex narratives and allows your mind to relax completely. As we wrap up this deep dive into why Family Guy has become the ultimate sleep companion for millions of viewers, remember that comfort viewing is a deeply personal experience. What works for one person might not work for another, but there's something undeniably special about a show that can make you laugh, think, and ultimately feel at peace, all within the span of 22 minutes. The genius of Family Guy as a sleep aid lies in its perfect balance of engagement and relaxation. It's stimulating enough to occupy your conscious mind and prevent anxious thoughts from taking over, but familiar and comforting enough to allow your subconscious to begin the journey towards sleep. Whether you're drawn to Stewie's elaborate schemes, Peter's childlike wonder, or Brian's philosophical musings, there's something in this animated chaos for everyone. So the next time you find yourself reaching for that remote at bedtime, remember that you're not just choosing mindless entertainment. You're selecting a carefully crafted comfort blanket that's helped millions of people transition from the stresses of the day into peaceful rest. Sweet dreams, and remember, in Quahog, everything always works out in the end. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some bedtime content about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving deep into the Griffin household with some fascinating facts that'll either help you drift off peacefully or keep you up thinking about just how wild this show really gets. Now, before we jump into our relaxing journey through Quahog, let me ask you something. Have you ever really stopped to think about how Family Guy has been part of our lives for over 2 decades? Since 1999, this show has given us countless laughs, memorable cutaway gags, and characters that have become household names. But tonight, we're going beyond the surface-level humor to explore some truly mind-blowing details you probably never knew. Here's something that might surprise you right off the bat. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. The network executives thought the show wasn't finding its audience. But here's where it gets interesting. Adult Swim picked up the reruns, and the show exploded in popularity. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. They brought it back in 2005, and it's been running ever since. Sometimes, the best things in life really do come back when you least expect them. Let's talk about the voice behind Stewie Griffin for a moment. Seth MacFarlane, the show's creator, originally based Stewie's voice on a combination of Rex Harrison from My Fair Lady and a generic posh English accent. But here's the fascinating part. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that Stewie's sexuality has always been deliberately ambiguous. The character exists in this interesting space where his romantic interests shift depending on what serves the story best. It's actually a clever writing technique that keeps the character unpredictable and allows for more diverse storylines. Speaking of voices, did you know that Seth MacFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewterschmidt? That's 6 major characters, all coming from one incredibly talented vocal performer. When you think about it, MacFarlane is essentially having conversations with himself in most scenes. The man has to switch between these distinct personalities, sometimes within the same sentence. It's like being a one-person theater troupe. Here's a production fact that'll blow your mind. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial concept to final product. The animation process alone requires hundreds of individual artists working on different aspects. Every single movement, facial expression, and background detail has to be hand-drawn and then digitally colored. When you consider that the show produces over 20 episodes per season, you start to realize the incredible amount of work that goes into bringing the Griffin family to life. The show's famous cutaway gags weren't actually planned from the beginning. They evolved naturally as the writers found themselves wanting to include jokes that didn't fit into the main storyline. These random flashbacks and fantasy sequences became such a signature element that other animated shows have tried to copy the format, but none have quite captured the same spontaneous energy that Family Guy brings to these moments. Now, let's explore some character development that might help you see the show in a new light. Brian Griffin, the family dog, was originally going to be much more of a background character. McFarlane has said that Brian evolved into the show's voice of reason almost by accident. The writers kept finding themselves using Brian as a way to comment on Peter's more outrageous behavior, and gradually he became this intellectual counterpoint to the family's chaos. It's interesting how a character can grow beyond their original intended purpose. Here's something about the show's cultural impact that's worth pondering as you drift off tonight. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and broadcasts in over 100 countries worldwide. But the cultural references and American humor don't always translate perfectly. International versions sometimes have to completely rewrite jokes or replace cultural references with local equivalents. Imagine trying to explain a 1,980 seconds American pop culture reference to someone in rural Japan. The localization teams for this show deserve serious recognition. The relationship dynamics within the Griffin family actually reflect a lot of real family psychology, despite all the absurd situations they find themselves in. Take the sibling rivalry between Chris and Meg, for example. While it's exaggerated for comedic effect, it captures something genuine about how teenagers navigate their place within family hierarchies. Even the marriage between Lois and Peter, with all its dysfunction, touches on real issues that many couples face, just amplified to ridiculous proportions. One aspect of the show that's evolved significantly over the years is its approach to social commentary. Early seasons focused more on pure absurdist humor, but as the series progressed, it began tackling more complex social and political issues. The writers found ways to embed serious conversations about topics like religion, politics, and social justice within the framework of outrageous comedy. It's like sneaking vegetables into a kid's favorite dessert. The animation style of Family Guy has also undergone subtle but significant changes over the decades. If you compare early episodes to recent ones, you'll notice the color palette has become richer, the character movements more fluid, and the background details more elaborate. Technology has allowed the animators to add layers of visual storytelling that weren't possible in the better show's early days. Yet they've managed to maintain the core visual identity that makes Family Guy instantly recognizable. Let's talk about the show's relationship with music for a moment. Family Guy has featured hundreds of musical numbers over the years, from elaborate production numbers to simple character songs. Seth MacFarlane's background in musical theater heavily influences these sequences. Many of the songs are surprisingly well crafted from a musical standpoint, with proper verse-chorus structures and sophisticated orchestrations. Some episodes are essentially animated musicals disguised as sitcom episodes. Here's a fascinating detail about the show's writing process. The writer's room operates on a principle they call yes and, borrowed from improvisational comedy. When someone pitches an idea, no matter how outrageous, the group tries to build on it rather than shut it down immediately. This approach has led to some of the show's most memorable and bizarre moments. It's a reminder that creativity often flourishes when we suspend our initial judgment and let ideas develop naturally. The character of Meg Griffin represents something unique in television comedy. She's simultaneously the most normal member of her family and the one who receives the most abuse from everyone around her. This creates an interesting dynamic where the audience often sympathizes with her while still laughing at her misfortunes. It's a delicate balance that the writers have maintained for over 20 years, and it speaks to something deeper about how we treat people who don't fit into expected social roles. Cleveland Brown's departure to his own spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy created some interesting continuity challenges for the writers. They had to explain his absence and return in ways that felt natural to the ongoing story. while also acknowledging the real-world production reasons behind these changes. It's a perfect example of how television shows must constantly adapt to behind-the-scenes realities while maintaining narrative consistency. The show's approach to time and continuity is intentionally flexible. Characters age slowly or not at all, major events from one episode might never be mentioned again, and the family's financial situation fluctuates wildly depending on story needs. This loose approach to continuity allows for maximum creative freedom, but also creates opportunities for dedicated fans to spot inconsistencies and create theories about the show's internal logic. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. Countless memes, viral videos, and social media trends have originated from or been inspired by the show. The phrase, "Oh no, he didn't," might never have become a cultural touchstone without Peter Griffin's dramatic delivery. The show's rapid-fire humor style has influenced how people create and consume comedy content online. The voice acting in Family Guy extends far beyond the main cast. Over the years, the show has featured hundreds of celebrity guest voices, from major Hollywood stars to political figures to fellow comedians. Some guests play themselves, others take on original characters, and a few have become recurring voices in the Family Guy universe. The casting directors have an impressive ability to match celebrity voices with characters that enhance rather than distract from the story. Here's something that might help you appreciate the show's craft as you wind down for the night. The timing of Family Guy's comedy is incredibly precise. Voice actors don't just deliver lines. They perform them with specific rhythms and pauses that maximize comedic impact. The editors then fine-tune these performances, sometimes adjusting timing by fractions of seconds to hit the perfect comedic beat. It's a level of precision that most viewers never consciously notice but definitely feel. The show's relationship with censorship has evolved significantly since its early days. Standards and practices for television have changed, allowing Family Guy to push boundaries that would have been impossible in its first seasons. At the same time, the writers have developed more sophisticated ways to be provocative without simply relying on shock value. It's an interesting case study in how creative people adapt to changing cultural standards while maintaining their artistic voice. As we near the end of our journey through these Family Guy facts, consider how the show has managed to remain relevant across multiple generations of viewers. People who watched the show as teenagers in the early 2000s are now watching it with their own children. The humor that resonates with different age groups varies, but there's something universal about the Griffin family's chaotic energy that transcends generational boundaries. The production team behind Family Guy has created what amounts to a small animation empire. The success of the main show led to spin-offs, specials, video games, merchandise, and even live concert tours featuring the show's music. From a business perspective, Family Guy demonstrates how a creative property can expand far beyond its original medium while maintaining its core identity. Finally, as you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something special in the landscape of American entertainment. It's a show that dares to be completely ridiculous while occasionally touching on profound truths about family, society, and human nature. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who just discovered the show, there's something comforting about knowing that somewhere in the fictional town of Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into some new absurd adventure. The next time you watch Family Guy, you might find yourself noticing details you never saw before, appreciating the craft behind the chaos, or simply enjoying the comfort of familiar characters doing wonderfully unpredictable things. Sometimes the best. Entertainment doesn't try to change your life. It just makes the everyday world a little more interesting and a lot more fun. Sweet dreams, and remember, tomorrow's another day in Quahog, and there's always another ridiculous adventure waiting just around the corner. Whether you're Team Peter, Team Brian, or even Team Meg, the Griffin family will be there whenever you need a laugh or just want to escape into a world where anything can happen, and usually does. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated shows while you're drifting off to sleep? Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating world of Family Guy with some incredibly random facts that might just surprise you. So, grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's explore the weird and wonderful universe of the Griffin family. Did you know that Family Guy wasn't originally supposed to be called Family Guy at all? Seth MacFarlane's original pitch to Fox was titled The Life of Larry, which was actually a 7-minute short film he created while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design. The executives liked it so much that they asked him to develop it into a full series, but they wanted a catchier name. After going through dozens of potential titles, they settled on Family Guy because it perfectly captured the show's essence of an average American family dealing with extraordinary situations. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's something that might keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. MacFarlane was originally scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but he overslept and missed the flight by just 15 minutes. That flight was one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. If he had made that flight, we might never have gotten Family Guy, American Dad, or The Orville. Sometimes, the smallest moments change everything. Now, let's talk about the voices behind your favorite characters. You probably know that Seth MacFarlane voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, but did you know he also voices Carter Pewterschmidt, Tom Tucker, and even Glenn Quagmire? That's right. The same person who voices the intellectual dog Brian also creates Quagmire's distinctive giggity giggity catchphrase. MacFarlane developed these voices during his college years, often entertaining friends at parties with his impressions and original character voices. Here's a random fact about Stewie that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally part of his design. The animators were struggling with how to make a baby character visually interesting and memorable. During one late-night brainstorming session, someone jokingly suggested making his head shaped like a football, and everyone laughed. But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The unusual head shape would make Stewie instantly recognizable and add to his alien-like otherworldly intelligence. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. The character of Meg Griffin has an interesting backstory that goes beyond what we see on screen. Originally, Meg was supposed to be the breakout character of the show. The writers envisioned her as the relatable teenager that audiences would connect with most. However, as the show evolved, they realized that making Meg the constant target of the family's jokes created much funnier dynamics. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by season 3, Meg's role as the family punching bag was firmly established. Did you know that Family Guy holds several Guinness World Records? One of the most interesting is for the longest gap between a TV show's cancellation and its return to production. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after 3 seasons, but DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim proved so popular that Fox brought it back in 2005. That's a 3-year gap, which was unprecedented at the time for an animated series. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken have their own fascinating history. The first fight appeared in the episode Da Boom and was originally intended to be a one-off gag. However, the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to make it a recurring element. Each subsequent chicken fight became more elaborate and destructive, with the animators treating them almost like action movie sequences. The fights have destroyed everything from fast food restaurants to airports, and the animation team spends months planning each new encounter. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's animation process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with a writer's room, where scripts are developed and refined. Then comes voice recording, which can take several weeks, as actors often record their lines separately. After that, the storyboard artists create rough sketches of every scene, followed by the actual animation process, which involves hundreds of individual drawings for just a few minutes of screen time. The character of Cleveland Brown was almost written off the show much earlier than his eventual departure for the Cleveland Show. During season 2, the writers were struggling with what to do with Cleveland's character, feeling like he didn't have enough distinct personality traits to warrant significant screen time. However, voice actor Mike Henry brought such warmth and humor to the role that the writers decided to develop Cleveland further, eventually giving him his own spin-off series. One of the most random facts about Family Guy involves the show's relationship with real-world events. The writers have an unusual policy about incorporating current events into episodes. Because of the long production timeline, they rarely reference events that happened less than 8 months before an episode airs. This has led to some interesting anachronisms, where characters will reference old news as if it just happened, creating an odd time bubble effect that longtime viewers have learned to expect. The character of Brian Griffin represents one of the most complex writing challenges in the show. Creating a talking dog who serves as the voice of reason while still maintaining dog-like characteristics requires a delicate balance. The writers often debate how much human intelligence to give Brian versus when to remind audiences that he's still fundamentally a dog. This internal contradiction has led to some of the show's most interesting character development moments. Did you know that several celebrities have refused to appear on Family Guy due to its controversial content? However, many others have embraced the show's irreverent humor. Adam West, who played the mayor of Quahog, loved his portrayal so much that he considered his Family Guy character to be his favorite role later in his career. West appreciated how the show exaggerated his public persona while still showing genuine affection for his Batman legacy. The Griffin family house has its own interesting design history. The animators based the house's exterior on a real home in Cranston, Rhode Island, not far from where Seth MacFarlane grew up. However, the interior layout was designed to be deliberately confusing and inconsistent. Rooms appear and disappear between episodes, and the house seems to have impossible spatial relationships. This was an intentional choice by the animators, who felt that a realistic house layout would be too limiting for the show's surreal storylines. Here's a fact that might surprise animation fans. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to extensively use computer-generated imagery mixed with traditional animation. While the characters are still hand-drawn, many background elements, vehicles, and special effects are created using CGI. This hybrid approach allows for more dynamic camera movements and elaborate action sequences while maintaining the classic cartoon aesthetic that fans love. The show's famous cutaway gags have their own unique writing process. The writers maintain a separate document called the Cutaway Bible, which contains hundreds of potential cutaway ideas organized by category. When writing an episode, they can quickly reference this document to find gags that fit the moment. Some cutaways have been in this document for years before finding the right episode to appear in. Quagmire's character design underwent significant changes during the show's early development. Originally, he was going to be much older and was designed to look more like a stereotypical dirty old man. However, the animators felt this made him too creepy and unsympathetic. They gradually made him younger and more cartoonish, which allowed them to push his character's outrageous behavior further while keeping him somewhat likable. The voice of Stewie Griffin required Seth MacFarlane to develop a unique vocal technique. To create Stewie's distinctive British accent and sophisticated vocabulary, MacFarlane studied recordings of Rex Harrison, particularly his performance in My Fair Lady. He then combined this with elements of Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island to create Stewie's pompous, intellectual tone. MacFarlane has said that Stewie is the most physically demanding character for him to voice, often leaving recording sessions with a sore throat. One of the strangest production facts about Family Guy involves the show's approach to celebrity deaths. The writers maintain a file of pre-written jokes about various celebrities, organized by age and health status. This allows them to quickly produce episodes that reference celebrity deaths without seeming exploitative or rushed. However, they've occasionally had to scrap entire episodes when celebrities they'd written jokes about outlived expectations. The character of Joe Swanson was inspired by a real person that Seth MacFarlane knew in college. Joe's positive attitude, despite his disability, was based on a classmate who had been paralyzed in a skiing accident, but remained one of the most optimistic people MacFarlane had ever met. The writers take Joe's character seriously, often consulting with disability advocacy groups to ensure their portrayal is respectful, while still allowing for commentemporation of varioe. The show's trademark humor. Did you know that Family Guy has influenced real-world language? Several phrases from the show have entered common usage, including "giggity, shut up Meg," and "whose leg do you have to hump to get a dry martini around here?" Linguists have noted that the show's impact on casual speech patterns, particularly among younger viewers, has been surprisingly significant for an animated comedy. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production process than regular episodes. Seth MacFarlane, who has a background in musical theater, often writes the songs himself. The production team includes professional musicians and choreographers who help design the elaborate musical sequences. Some of the show's musical episodes have taken over a year to complete, with the songs recorded by full orchestras in professional studios. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's international versions. Family Guy is broadcast in over 50 countries, and many jokes are completely rewritten for different cultures. The German version, for example, changes many of the pop culture references to focus on German celebrities and historical events. The process of adapting the show for international audiences often requires rewriting entire scenes while maintaining the same comedic timing. The character of Death, who appears occasionally throughout the series, was almost given his own spin-off show. The concept would have followed Death as he went about his daily job of collecting souls, with each episode featuring guest appearances by Family Guy characters. The idea was shelved when the writers realized it would be too dark for the show's target demographic, but elements of the concept occasionally appear in Death's appearances on the main show. Family Guy's production team includes several former Disney animators who brought traditional animation techniques to the show's more elaborate sequences. This blend of old-school animation craftsmanship with modern computer technology gives Family Guy a unique visual style that sets it apart from other animated comedies. The animators often hide small details and Easter eggs in background scenes that only dedicated fans notice. The show's approach to time and continuity is deliberately inconsistent, but there's actually a method to the madness. The writers maintain what they call a flexible timeline, where characters can age or remain the same age depending on what serves the story best. This allows them to explore different aspects of characters without being locked into strict chronological progression. One final random fact to end our journey through the world of Family Guy. The show's theme song was originally much longer and included additional verses about each family member. The shortened version we know today was created for time constraints, but the full version occasionally appears in special episodes or DVD extras. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that he'd love to do an entire episode featuring just the complete theme song with elaborate visuals for each verse. As we wrap up our exploration of these random Family Guy facts, remember that behind every animated comedy lies countless hours of creativity, planning, and attention to detail. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these behind-the-scenes glimpses reveal the incredible amount of work that goes into creating our favorite animated families. Sweet dreams, and maybe you'll dream of cutaway gags and chicken fights tonight. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating worlds hidden within your favorite shows. Picture this. You're scrolling through endless YouTube videos at 2 a.m., your brain craving something familiar yet fascinating to drift off to. Well, buckle up because I've got a treasure trove of Family Guy secrets that'll either help you sleep peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this animated chaos machine actually works. From behind-the-scenes drama to mind-bending production facts, these random tidbits about the Griffin family will give your brain exactly what it needs for that perfect sleepy time content. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. The voice of Stewie Griffin, that diabolical baby genius we all know and love, is performed by the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane himself. But here's the kicker that most people don't realize. MacFarlane originally based Stewie's voice on the legendary actor Rex Harrison, who played Professor Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. That posh, sophisticated British accent that makes Stewie sound like he stepped out of a Victorian manor. It's basically a baby doing an impression of a 1,960 seconds Broadway star. The irony is delicious when you think about it. This character who spends half his time plotting world domination is essentially channeling a musical theater legend. Now, if you think that's wild, wait until you hear about the show's near-death experience that almost prevented it from becoming the cultural phenomenon we know today. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and for a hot minute there, it looked like the Griffin family was done for good. But then something magical happened that literally brought the show back from the dead. DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns created such a massive fan following that Fox had no choice but to resurrect it in 2005. It's like the show became a zombie that refused to stay buried, clawing its way back to life through sheer fan devotion. The creation story of Family Guy itself reads like something out of a fever dream. Seth MacFarlane was just 24 years old when he pitched the show to Fox, making him one of the youngest people ever to create and run their own animated series for a major network. He literally animated the entire pilot episode by himself. spending months hunched over a desk drawing frame after frame while surviving on probably nothing but coffee and determination. The original pitch was actually inspired by his college thesis film called The Life of Larry, which featured a middle-aged man with a talking dog. Sound familiar? That little student film eventually evolved into the multi-million-dollar empire we know today. Speaking of that talking dog, Brian Griffin holds a special place in animation history for reasons you probably never considered. Unlike most cartoon pets who remain perpetually animal-like, Brian is essentially a human character who just happens to be a dog. He drives cars, drinks martinis, writes novels, and engages in complex philosophical debates. McFarlane has stated that Brian represents his own voice in the show more than any other character, which explains why the dog often serves as the moral compass of the family. It's basically McFarlane having conversations with himself through a talking animal, which, when you think about it, is either brilliant or slightly concerning. The show's controversial humor didn't emerge by accident. It was a carefully calculated rebellion against traditional family sitcoms. McFarlane deliberately set out to create the anti-Simpsons, something that would push every boundary the Simpsons wouldn't touch. Where The Simpsons used gentle satire and heartwarming family moments, Family Guy went nuclear with shock, humor, and deliberately offensive content. The cutaway gags, those random flashback sequences that became the show's signature, were originally McFarlane's solution to a problem he had with traditional sitcom pacing. He wanted to break free from the constraints of linear storytelling and create something that felt more like channel surfing through a fever dream. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the craft behind the chaos. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial script to final animation. That means the episodes you're watching right now were being worked on almost a year ago. The animation process alone involves hundreds of artists working across multiple studios, with the initial designs created in California before being sent overseas for full animation. It's like a massive international relay race, where each handoff has to be perfect or the whole episode falls apart. The voice acting sessions are apparently legendary affairs that sound more like comedy improv shows than traditional recording sessions. McFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Brian, Peter, and Glenn Quagmire, often having entire conversations with himself in the recording booth. The other voice actors have described watching him switch between characters mid-sentence as both impressive and slightly unsettling. Imagine seeing someone argue with themselves in 4 different voices while maintaining perfect character consistency. It's basically like watching a one-man theater performance in real time. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production is how the writer's room operates. Unlike many animated shows that plan seasons far in advance, Family Guy's writing process is notoriously chaotic and last-minute. Writers have described sessions where entire episodes get scrapped days before animation begins, leading to frantic rewrites and sleepless nights. This seat-of-the-pants approach actually contributes to the show's unpredictable energy, but it also means that voice actors sometimes receive new scripts literally hours before recording sessions. The show's relationship with censorship has been a constant dance between pushing boundaries and avoiding network wrath. Family Guy has developed an almost scientific approach to testing limits, deliberately writing jokes that are slightly more offensive than what they actually want to air, knowing that network censors will demand cuts. The final version that reaches viewers is often the writer's actual intended content, achieved through strategic overwriting and negotiation. It's psychological warfare, disguised as comedy writing. McFarlane's musical background plays a much larger role in the show than most people realize. Before creating Family Guy, he was actually a jazz vocalist and pianist, which explains the numerous musical numbers scattered throughout episodes. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just random comedy bits. They're genuine musical theater productions compressed into cartoon format. McFarlane has stated that he views Family Guy as partly a variety show, using the Griffin family as a framework to showcase different types of entertainment within each episode. The character designs themselves tell an interesting story about animation philosophy. Notice how the Griffin family members all have distinctly different body shapes and facial structures, unlike many cartoon families where everyone looks like variations of the same template. Peter's round, doughy appearance was specifically designed to contrast with Lois's sharp, angular features, while Stewie's football-shaped head was meant to make him instantly recognizable even in silhouette. These design choices weren't arbitrary. They were carefully calculated to ensure each character would be visually distinct, even in crowded scenes or quick cuts. Here's something that'll change how you watch the show forever. The infamous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned as recurring segments. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but the animation team had so much fun creating the over-the-top action sequence that it became a running theme. Those elaborate, destruction-filled battles that seem to last forever? They're essentially the animation team showing off their action sequence skills in a comedy show, like flexing creative muscles that don't usually get exercised in traditional sitcom animation. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is uniquely twisted compared to other animated series. While most cartoons treat celebrity appearances as special events, with the famous person playing themselves or a character clearly meant to be them, Family Guy often buries celebrity voices in minor roles without any fanfare. A-list actors will voice background characters for single lines, and viewers might never realize they just heard a famous person deliver a throwaway joke. It's the entertainment industry equivalent of hiding expensive ingredients in cheap fast food. Family Guy's international versions reveal fascinating cultural differences in humor. In some countries, entire episodes have been rewritten because the original jokes simply don't translate, not just linguistically, but culturally. What Americans find hilarious might be completely incomprehensible to audiences in other parts of the world, leading to localized versions that are essentially different shows with the same characters. It's like each country gets its own flavor of the Griffin family chaos, tailored to local sensibilities. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy extends into some surprisingly niche markets. Beyond the obvious t-shirts and DVDs, there are Family Guy-themed wine collections, luxury watches, and even high-end collectible sculptures that cost thousands of dollars. The show that built its reputation on lowbrow humor has somehow spawned upscale merchandise that wouldn't look out of place in expensive boutiques. It's cultural cognitive dissonance at its finest. The writing staff includes people from incredibly diverse backgrounds: former stand-up comedians, Harvard graduates, television veterans, and complete newcomers to the industry. This mix creates a unique creative environment where highbrow intellectual humor crashes into street-level comedy instincts. The result is a show that can reference obscure philosophical concepts in one scene and make fart jokes in the next, often within the same episode. Animation errors in Family Guy have become something of a cult fascination among fans. Unlike other shows that try to hide mistakes, Family Guy occasionally leaves obvious animation goofs in the final product, either intentionally, as Easter eggs, or because the production schedule doesn't allow for fixes. These errors have spawned online communities dedicated to spotting and cataloging every miscolored character, floating object, or impossible perspective. It's accidental, interactive entertainment, where viewers become detectives hunting for visual inconsistencies. The show's theme song, that bouncy piano melody everyone knows by heart, was originally much longer and included additional verses that were cut for time. The full version tells a more complete story about the Griffin family's dynamics, but network television's rigid timing requirements forced it down to the bare essentials. MacFarlane has occasionally performed the complete version at live concerts, giving fans a glimpse of what could have been the opening sequence if television had more flexible formatting. Voice acting for animated shows requires a completely different skill set than live-action performance, and Family Guy pushes these demands to extremes. The actors often need to deliver lines while laughing, crying, or even while their characters are supposed to be eating, fighting, or running. This means recording sessions frequently involve voice actors doing physical comedy performances in sound booths, acting out entire scenes with just their voices, while making exaggerated facial expressions that no one will ever see, but that somehow make the vocal performance more authentic. The show's relationship with current events creates unique production challenges. Because episodes take months to complete, jokes about contemporary issues often feel dated by the time they air, leading to a complex balancing act between topical relevance and timeless humor. Writers have developed strategies for creating content that feels current without being tied to specific news cycles, though sometimes they get caught off guard when major events happen during production and their carefully planned episodes suddenly seem tone-deaf or prescient in ways they never intended. Family Guy's influence on internet culture extends far beyond just memes and viral videos. The show's cutaway gag structure essentially predicted how people would consume media in the social media age. Short, disconnected bursts of content that don't require following a linear narrative. Those seemingly random flashbacks that interrupt the main story. They're basically the television equivalent of scrolling through TikTok or Twitter, jumping from one unrelated thought to another without warning. The economics behind Family Guy reveal interesting insights into how modern television actually works. Despite being an animated show with relatively high production costs, it's incredibly profitable because animated content doesn't age the same way live-action shows do. There are no aging actors demanding higher salaries, no physical sets that deteriorate, and no location shoots that become impossible due to changing landscapes. The Griffin family can theoretically exist forever without any of the logistical problems that eventually kill most television series. Behind all the controversy and chaos, Family Guy operates like a massive creative experiment in pushing the boundaries of what television can be. Every episode is essentially asking the question, what if we tried this completely ridiculous thing and somehow made it work within the framework of a family sitcom? Sometimes the experiments fail spectacularly, but when they succeed, they create moments of television that are genuinely unlike anything else on the air. The show has created its own internal mythology that's become increasingly complex over the years. Character relationships, running gags, and callback references have built up layers of continuity that reward longtime viewers while potentially confusing newcomers. It's like a secret club where the membership requirement is having watched hundreds of hours of animated chaos, and the reward is understanding jokes that are incomprehensible to everyone else. And here's perhaps the most interesting fact about Family Guy. Despite all its success and cultural impact, the show remains fundamentally unpredictable. After more than 2 decades on the air, it can still surprise viewers with completely unexpected creative choices, bizarre guest appearances, or experimental episodes that break its own established rules. In a television landscape increasingly dominated by formulaic content, Family Guy maintains a chaotic creativity that keeps audiences guessing what might happen next. So there you have it, a deep dive into the wonderfully weird world behind one of television's most controversial animated families. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or staying wide awake in fascination, these facts reveal just how much complexity hides behind what appears to be simple cartoon chaos. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the Griffin household, normal is just another word for boring. Picture this, you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and your brain is buzzing with the day's chaos. You need something familiar, something comforting, something that'll help you drift off into peaceful sleep. Well, tonight, we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog with some random Family Guy facts that'll ease you into dreamland. So grab your favorite pillow, get cozy, and let me tell you some fascinating tidbits about America's most dysfunctional animated family that might just surprise you. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought the ratings weren't strong enough to justify keeping it alive. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim. The DVD sales were so phenomenal that they broke records for animated series at the time. Fans were buying up seasons faster than Peter could down a beer at the Drunken Clam. This unprecedented demand from home video sales convinced Fox to bring the show back in 2005, making it one of the first series ever to be resurrected primarily due to DVD performance. The voice behind Peter Griffin, Seth MacFarlane, actually does most of his recording sessions incredibly quickly. While many voice actors take hours to perfect their performances, MacFarlane can knock out an entire episode's worth of dialogue in about 2 hours. That's pretty impressive when you consider he voices not just Peter, but also Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. His rapid recording style comes from his background in radio, where timing and efficiency were absolutely crucial. MacFarlane developed his distinctive character voices during his college years at the Rhode Island School of Design, where he actually created an early version of Family Guy as his senior thesis project. Speaking of voices, here's something that might keep you pondering as you fall asleep. Stewie's accent isn't actually British. Seth MacFarlane has explained that Stewie's voice is meant to be a sort of generic upper-class accent that could come from anywhere. It's a theatrical, affected way of speaking that's supposed to make Stewie sound sophisticated and pretentious, regardless of geographic origin. The inspiration came from old Hollywood actors and theater performers who adopted similar speech patterns to sound more refined. The character of Glenn Quagmire has one of the most disturbing backstories in animated television, though it's mostly revealed through throwaway gags and quick references. His middle name is apparently Quentin, and he's supposedly been a pilot since the 1960 seconds, which would make him significantly older than he appears. The show has hinted that he's been involved in various historical events, always in morally questionable ways. His famous catchphrase, "giggity," wasn't actually in the original character design. It evolved naturally during Seth MacFarlane's recording sessions and became so popular with the writers that they started incorporating it into more and more episodes. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. The Griffin family's house layout is incredibly consistent throughout the series. The writers and animators keep detailed floor plans to ensure that rooms connect properly from episode to episode. This level of continuity is actually quite rare in animated sitcoms, where houses often seem to have magical expanding and contracting rooms depending on what the plot needs. The Griffin house is based on an actual home in Cranston, Rhode Island, though it's been modified significantly for animation purposes. Brian's character has evolved dramatically since the show's early days. Originally, he was written as more of a straight man to Peter's antics, serving as the voice of reason in the household. However, as the series progressed, the writers began exploring Brian's flaws more deeply. His pretentiousness, his drinking problem, his romantic failures, and his writing aspirations all became major character traits. This evolution reflects Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and his willingness to make his characters more complex and sometimes less likable. The show's cultural impact extends far beyond television screens. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture in ways that few other shows can claim. The Roadhouse cutaway gag became a popular meme format years before most people even knew what memes were. The "oh no" moments, the chicken fights, and countless other Family Guy references have become part of online vernacular. This digital footprint has helped keep the show relevant with younger audiences who might discover it through social media rather than traditional television viewing. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how cutaway gags are created. The writers have a separate room where they brainstorm completely random, unrelated jokes that can be inserted into episodes when needed. These gags are often written months before they're actually used, and they're stored in a database that writers can search through when they need to fill time or add comedy to a scene. This system allows for the show's signature non-sequitur humor, while maintaining a consistent production schedule. The character of Meg has been voiced by 2 different actors, though most viewers probably never noticed the change. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg during the first season, but Mila Kunis took over starting in season 2. The transition was so seamless that it barely registered with audiences. Mila Kunis has mentioned in interviews that she initially tried to match Lacey Chabert's interpretation of the character, but eventually developed her own approach. Interestingly, Kunis was also voicing Jackie Burkhardt on That 70 Seconds show at the same time, showcasing her range as a voice actor. Family Guy's relationship with censorship has been fascinating to observe over the years. The show has pushed boundaries consistently, sometimes getting away with content that surprises even longtime viewers. However, there are also episodes that have been banned or heavily edited for various reasons. The censorship battles have actually become part of the show's identity, with Seth MacFarlane and the writers often incorporating discussions about censorship directly into episodes. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is uniquely irreverent. Unlike many animated series that treat celebrity appearances as special events, Family Guy often has famous people, voice characters, who are immediately killed off or humiliated in some way. This approach reflects the show's general irreverence towards celebrity culture and its willingness to bite the hand that feeds it. Many celebrities have appeared on the show specifically because they wanted to be made fun of, which says something interesting about the show's cultural position. Here's something that might surprise you. Family Guy has actually won several Emmy nominations and awards over the years. While it's often dismissed as lowbrow humor, the show has been recognized for its voice acting, animation, and music. Seth MacFarlane's musical numbers, in particular, have received critical acclaim. His background in musical theater shows through in episodes featuring elaborate song and dance sequences, which often rival those found in major animated films. The show's international versions are fascinating studies in cultural adaptation. Different countries have had to handle the show's content in various ways, sometimes changing jokes entirely to make them relevant to local audiences. In some cases, entire episodes have been restructured because certain references or situations don't translate across cultural boundaries. These international versions offer interesting insights into how humor travels, or doesn't travel, across different societies. Family Guy's merchandise empire is surprisingly extensive and eclectic. Beyond the typical t-shirts and action figures, there have been Family Guy board games, cookbooks, and even meditation guides. The show's merchandising success demonstrates how deeply it has penetrated popular culture. Fans don't just watch Family Guy, they incorporate it into various aspects of their lives through products that extend the show's universe into the real world. The writing process for Family Guy involves what the staff calls manatee balls, a reference to a South Park episode that made fun of Family Guy's writing style. The writers actually embraced this criticism and lean into the randomness that South Park was mocking. They've developed systems for generating increasingly absurd combinations of references, situations, and characters. This self-aware approach to their own writing style has become part of the show's meta-humor. Seth MacFarlane's other projects have often served as testing grounds for Family Guy concepts. The Orville, his science fiction series, actually uses some of the same character dynamics and humor styles that he developed for Family Guy, just in a different setting. Similarly, American Dad and The Cleveland Show served as laboratories where different aspects of the Family Guy formula could be explored and refined. The show's relationship with current events is complex and ever-evolving. Family Guy often references things that happened months before episodes air due to production schedules, but the writers have developed techniques for keeping the show feeling current. They've also mastered the art of making jokes that feel timeless, even when they're about very specific cultural moments. One aspect of Family Guy that often goes unnoticed is its sophisticated understanding of animation history. The show regularly pays homage to classic animation styles, from Disney to Warner Brothers to obscure experimental films. These references serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate the creator's deep knowledge of their medium. They provide visual variety, and they create inside jokes for animation enthusiasts. The show's impact on other animated series cannot be overstated. Family Guy's success opened doors for more adult-oriented animated programming and influenced the humor styles of countless other shows. Its willingness to break the fourth wall, its pop culture reference density, and its approach to controversial topics have all been adopted and adapted by other animated series. As you drift off to sleep, consider this. Family Guy represents a unique moment in television history, where traditional broadcast standards, internet culture, and animation technology all converged to create something entirely new. The show emerged just as DVD sales were becoming important, just as internet memes were developing, and just as animation technology was becoming sophisticated enough to support rapid production schedules. The voice actors have developed such strong relationships with their characters that they often improvise during recording sessions. These improvisations frequently make it into the final episodes, adding spontaneity to what could otherwise be very controlled animation. The chemistry between voice actors, even when they're recording separately, comes through in the final product in ways that feel natural and unforced. Family Guy's legacy will likely be its demonstration that animated television could be both commercially successful and artistically ambitious while maintaining an irreverent, anti-establishment attitude. It proved that audiences were hungry for content that didn't talk down to them, that referenced the full spectrum of popular culture, and that wasn't afraid to offend or surprise. So as you close your eyes tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, someone is discovering Family Guy for the first time. Someone else is rewatching their favorite episode, and the creators are probably working on new ways to surprise, shock, and entertain audiences. In the grand tradition of animated comedy, Family Guy continues to push boundaries, challenge expectations, and remind us that sometimes the most comforting thing about entertainment is its complete unpredictability. Sweet dreams, and remember, tomorrow is another day in Quahog, where anything can happen, and usually does.